Chapter 3388. Xiaobao exclaimed in surprise. He was pleasantly surprised. The cat scissors were lifelike. The corners and the details were exquisite without a trace of coarseness. The cat's expression was lazy and cute, and its big eyes were lively and charming. Was this a three-dimensional greeting card? However, who was the one who did it? And who secretly put it on his bed? Could it be Uncle Fu? Xiaobao put on his clothes and took the card to Uncle Fu. He asked excitedly, Uncle, did you make this? Uncle Fu looked down at the card in his hand and smiled knowingly. He nodded. Yeah, what do you think? Do you like it? Xiaobao nodded excitedly. Yeah, I like it very much. I didn't expect Uncle Fu to make such a beautiful greeting card. But why was the card you made yesterday so ugly? This is what a greeting card should be. Uncle Fu scratched the back of his head guiltily. He coughed awkwardly and cleared his throat. No, I was just trying to make you happy. But in reality, this greeting card was not made by him at all. In the morning, a man who had stayed up all night to make the card came to him and asked him to put the card on Xiaobao's bed. Uncle Fu's eyes almost fell out of their sockets when he saw the greeting card made by Gu Jinglian. Old master, I didn't know you were so clever with your hands. Gu Jinglian glared at him. If it weren't for you useless people, I wouldn't have been so clever with my hands. Uncle Fu rubbed his nose awkwardly. You don't even know how to make a greeting card. Have you really gone senile? Fu Bo complained aggrievedly. How could that be? I've never made one before. Cut the crap, Gu Jinglian said. If there's a next time. There definitely won't be a next time. Gu Jinglian turned around and was about to go back to his room when he suddenly thought of something. He said to Uncle Fu, if that guy asks who did it, just say you did it. How would I dare to steal old master's credit? Do as I say. Gu Jinglian said coldly. Did you hear that? Uncle Fu looked at him and finally understood. He nodded. If you dare to leak any information, I won't spare you. Yes, master. Uncle Fu narrowed his eyes meaningfully and observed Gu Jinglian's uneasy expression. He knew. Master must have felt that staying up all night to make handicrafts for the little guy was a very shameful thing. However, Laoi was used to being stubborn and wanting to save face. Thus Uncle Fu took the blame. Xiaobao held the greeting card and found Chu Ho. He said happily, Mom, look, Uncle Fu made a greeting card for me. Is it nice? Chu Ho looked at the greeting card in his hand. The surface of the card was simple but exquisite. When he flipped it open, a lifelike kitten could be seen. However, Xiaobao said that it was Uncle Fu who did it. She didn't think so. Gu Jinglian probably felt that it was too shameful for him to stay up all night to make a greeting card for a child. So he pushed the blame to Uncle Fu. It was hard to imagine that a man like him would make such a cute greeting card. Didn't match at all. Xiaobao suddenly said regretfully, if only Uncle made it. Chu Ho heard this but didn't understand. Why? Because. Xiaobao hugged the greeting card and pouted. I want a greeting card made by Uncle. Why must it be a greeting card made by Uncle? Chu Ho squatted down with interest and saw Xiaobao looking at her bashfully. He was a little embarrassed to say it out loud. Because he liked Uncle. Chapter 3389. Because he liked his uncle. Therefore, if it was something made by his uncle, he would cherish it even more. However, with his uncle's cold personality, he wouldn't have the patience to make such a childish thing, right? Xiaobao took the greeting card to school. In class, the teacher asked the children to show off their handiwork. The children ran up the stage, either proud of their handiwork. The children in kindergarten had limited hands-on skills. Therefore, most of them completed their handiwork with the accompaniment of their parents. Most of the children said proudly, my mom made this greeting card with me. Xiaobao flipped open the greeting card he made, but he was a little disappointed. This greeting card was made by Uncle Fu, but how he wished that it was made by his uncle. When it was his turn to go on stage, he took his time and walked to the blackboard with the greeting card. The teacher walked to his side and squatted down gently. Seeing his complicated expression, she was a little puzzled. What's wrong, Xiaobao? Where's your greeting card? Xiaobao passed the greeting card in his hand to her. The teacher opened the greeting card. Before she could show it to the children, she was stunned by the exquisite greeting card. She thought to herself, "This greeting card is so exquisite, it must be the work of an adult. How can a child be so good at hands-on work?" Just by looking at the edges and corners, which were so smooth that there were no flaws, she knew that the parent must have put in a lot of effort to make this. The teacher immediately spread out the greeting card and showed it to the other children. There was an exclamation from below the stage. This made Xiao Bao feel very proud. When the children on stage before him showed their greeting cards, there weren't so many exclamations. This showed that his greeting card was very beautiful. "What a cute kitten. This is the most beautiful greeting card I've ever seen." The teacher was even more suspicious. She even suspected that the greeting card was bought. However, upon closer inspection, she realized that every stroke was hand-pasted. Even the color was painted on with a marker pen. It must have been done by the parent. However, even though she was well aware of it, in order to take care of the child's feelings, she still asked, "Who made this card with you?" Xiao Bao opened his small mouth and was just about to say the words Uncle Fu, when he looked at the little guys sitting below the stage. They all stared at him with their eyes wide open and were extremely curious. He suddenly swallowed the words Uncle Fu. He hesitated and fiddled with his fingers. He was a little unwilling, and his eyes couldn't help but redden. He was really envious. His friends were all accompanied by their parents, but for him, it was Uncle Fu who made it. It was not that he disliked Uncle Fu, but compared to Uncle Fu, he hoped that this greeting card was made by Gu Jinglian. With that thought in mind, he subconsciously said, "My father made this." "Your father?" Xiao Bao suddenly felt a little guilty, but he still forced himself to nod. In his heart, he hugged Uncle Fu's thigh and cried, "Wah! Uncle Fu, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to betray you." Even the teacher couldn't help but be shocked. Chapter 3390. For example, if a man were to do this kind of manual work, he would not be able to do it so meticulously. This greeting card was too exquisite. It was hard to imagine that there would be such a meticulous man who could do such a boring manual work so meticulously. "My dad is very awesome." Xiao Bao clasped his hands behind his back and said proudly, "My dad is the most handsome man in the world. Not only is he very tall, he's also very good at everything. He's the most handsome man I've ever seen." The teacher looked at him with a smile. Children were innocent and unaffected. In a child's heart, their father had always been an imposing and sacred figure. Below the stage, a chubby boy suddenly stood up and accused, "Nonsense." Little Treasure looked at him and frowned curiously. "What nonsense are you talking about? Nuhan, what do you mean?" The chubby boy crossed his arms and said disdainfully, "Your dad is definitely not as handsome as my dad. My dad is the most handsome man in the world." Just as he said that, Xiao Bao was not convinced. "What right do you have to say that your dad is more handsome than my dad? My dad is the most handsome. Your dad is not." The chubby boy snorted and appeared to be very contemptuous. "My dad is famous for being a handsome man. My mom said that when my dad was young, many girls chased after him." Hearing that, the teacher could not help but laugh. In an adult's view of the world, these words were nothing more than the most innocent and pure side of a child. However, Xiao Bao took it seriously. "You're so fat, your dad should be chubby too." When the chubby boy heard that, the baby fat on his face trembled and his chubby face flushed red. He said angrily, "I'm not fat. You're fat. Big fatty, big fatty." The teacher hurriedly scolded, "Xiao Bao, don't quarrel. You're wrong to say big fatty Nuhan." Although the chubby boy was so fat, it was because he was spoiled by his family. He did not have any taboos and had a big appetite, so it was inevitable that he would be white and fat. Xiao Bao had just transferred to the school, so he had never seen the chubby boy's father before. However, at the parent-teacher conference, the other children and teachers in the class had all seen his father. He was indeed quite handsome. Therefore, the children below defended the chubby boy and said, "Nuhan's father is indeed very handsome, but we've never seen Xiao Bao's father before." "That's right, Xiao Bao can't be bragging, right? Nuhan's father is really handsome. I've seen it with my own eyes. I just don't know why Nuhan is so fat." "Poochie," the audience whispered to each other. Xiao Bao was indignant and said angrily, "Anyway, my dad is the most handsome. I'm not bragging." The fat boy still wanted to say something, but the teacher immediately asked him to sit down. At the same time, Xiao Bao returned to his seat, temporarily calming down the situation. However, Xiao Bao, who had returned to his seat, glared at the chubby boy, neither of them willing to give in to the other. When it was time for the break, the chubby boy moved over and walked to his desk. In the past, he crossed his arms and said arrogantly, "Xiao Bao, you brag that your dad is more handsome than my dad. You have to apologize to me." "Why should I apologize? My dad is handsome. I'm not lying or bragging." Chapter 3391. My dad is the most handsome in the world. My dad is the most handsome in the world. My dad is the most handsome in the universe. My dad is more handsome than your dad. A little girl sitting in front of Xiao Bao could not take it anymore. She turned around and said helplessly, "It's very simple. Xiao Bao, the parent-teacher conference is in a few days. When the time comes, your parents will definitely come. Is Nuhan's dad more handsome or your dad more handsome? Won't we know once we compete?" Parent-teacher conference. Xiao Bao widened his eyes in shock. He remembered this. This was the first parent-teacher conference since he entered school, so he took it very seriously. However, he did not dare to tell Gu Jinglian and Chu Ho. He was afraid that they would refuse. If they did not come, he would be very sad. He did not know if his uncle would come or not. What if his mom got angry when his uncle came? The relationship between the two of them did not seem to be very good. If his mom came and his dad did not come, then Nuhan would definitely advocate that his dad is the most handsome again. Xiao Bao felt a little troubled. For the first time in his life, he hoped that his uncle and mom's relationship could be like that of an ordinary family, loving and loving. That way, he could let them attend the parent-teacher conference together. Nuhan saw that Xiao Bao was silent and seemed to be hesitating. He said proudly, "What? I think you don't dare to compete, right? I already said that you were bragging. You just had to compete with me." "Who said that I don't dare to compete?" Xiao Bao imitated his posture and crossed his arms. He said angrily, "Let's compete then. Who's afraid of who? When the time comes, I'll let you see my most handsome dad in the world." "Humph. Then it's a deal," Nuhan said disdainfully. "A braggart is a big stupid pig." "I'm not a big stupid pig." Nuhan returned to her seat, and the storm came to a temporary end. The little girl sitting in front of Xiao Bao turned around and looked at the greeting card in his hand. She asked curiously, "Xiao Bao, was that greeting card really made by your dad?" Yeah." Xiao Bao scratched his head guiltily and nodded vaguely. The little girl showed an expression of admiration for the first time. "Your dad is amazing. I thought he bought this greeting card. My dad made this. Your dad is so gentle. He's willing to spend time making greeting cards with you. My dad doesn't have the patience." Baby Chu recalled how Gu Jinglian had looked like he wanted to eat him alive when he begged him to make a greeting card last night. He forced a smile and said, "My daddy is the best." After school, Chu He came to pick him up, only to see his gloomy expression. "What's wrong?" Xiao Bao shook his head, but he obviously had a heavy heart. Chu He hugged him in her arms and asked curiously, "What's wrong? What's on Xiao Bao's mind now? Aren't you going to tell me?" "Mom, the parent-teacher conference is coming soon. Will you come?" Chu Ho was stunned. She didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "Of course I will. I thought it was something serious. So it's about this? Don't worry. Mom will definitely attend Xiao Bao's parent-teacher conference." Xiao Bao's eyes lit up. "Really?" "Yeah." Xiao Bao jumped into her arms and said happily, "Mom is the best." He looked obedient on the surface, but he was secretly laughing. Sure enough, his mom was the easiest to handle. Chapter 3392. In the study, Gu Jinglian was holding a brush and writing calligraphy. Usually, when he was free, he did not have any other hobbies. He was used to writing calligraphy or painting. Just as he was concentrating, the door was suddenly pushed open. A rippling voice drifted in. "Uncle!" Gu Jinglian's eyebrows twitched. Because he was shocked, the tip of the brush in his hand suddenly deviated and the stroke went far away. "Uncle, are you there? Can I come in?" Xiao Bao's voice was flattering and fawning. It was coquettish and had a hint of coquettishness. However, this coquettishness was beyond the limits of what an ordinary person could bear. Gu Jinglian looked up with an ashen face, only to see Xiao Bao leaning against the door. His body was leaning against the side of the door. His fair and tender face was blinking his eyes, as if he was throwing flirtatious glances at him. Was he trying to curry favor with him? But why was he trying to curry favor for no reason? What's the matter? There's something I want to tell you. Gu Jinglian raised his guard and snorted coldly. Come in. He removed the failed brush and ink, laid out a new layer of rice paper, dipped the brush in ink, and picked up the brush again. He had just written a line when he saw from the corner of his eye that Xiao Bao had received approval. Like a shy little girl, he used his sleeves to cover half of his face and moved shyly into the study. The corners of Gu Jinglian's eyes twitched violently. He put down the brush and sized him up calmly. He had a feeling that this guy was a little abnormal today. Xiao Bao ran in front of him with small quick steps. He curtsied and even imitated a proper greeting. Greetings, uncle. Gu Jinglian snorted coldly. You may rise. Xiao Bao stood up. His clear eyes were bright and clear. He blinked lightly and threw a flirtatious glance at Gu Jinglian. Uncle, there's something I don't know if I should discuss with you. Gu Jinglian narrowed his eyes. Why did this guy suddenly speak in such a genteel manner? Had he been watching period dramas these days? Speak. This is what happened. Xiao Bao cleared his throat and said, the teacher gave us homework yesterday. With the help of Mom and Dad, we finished a greeting card. Isn't the greeting card completed? Xiao Bao complained bitterly. But that card was made by Uncle Fu, not you. Gu Jinglian's expression turned cold. Xiao Bao continued, feeling wronged. The other kids in the class are all accompanied by their parents. And then? Xiao Bao blinked and said cutely, however, if you feel guilty towards me, it's okay. There's still a chance to make it up to you. Compensation. To hell with it. He had stayed up all night to make a greeting card for him, and now he wanted him to compensate him? Compensate for what? It's like this. Xiao Bao rested his chin on the table, his two little paws holding the corner of the desk, and said with a smile, soon, the kindergarten will hold a parent-teacher meeting. About this? Gu Jinglian said lightly, let Uncle Fu accompany you. Why? Xiao Bao almost exclaimed, no. Why do you want Uncle Fu to accompany me? Gu Jinglian raised his eyebrows. Why? You want me to accompany you? Yeah. Xiao Bao nodded vigorously. Yes. Gu Jinglian said. I don't have time. You're lying. Xiao Bao said in an extremely aggrieved tone. You have so much time every day. Why can't you go to the parent-teacher meeting? Gu Jinglian said coldly. I'm bored. Whoosh. Chapter 3393. Xiao Bao clutched his chest sadly. He pointed at him with a trembling little finger and said pitifully, bored? Let Uncle Fu go with you. Gu Jinglian picked up the weasel brush and dipped the tip of the brush in ink to lightly tap the tip of Xiao Bao's nose. A black dot the size of a bean instantly appeared on the originally fair tip of his nose. A hint of a smile finally appeared on the man's cold and elegant face. His gaze fell on the sandpaper again as he said mildly, you can discuss this matter with Uncle Fu. Xiao Bao suddenly ran to his side. His two little hands balled into fists as he gently knocked on his thigh and massaged him from time to time, trying to please him in every possible way. Even if you're bored, you should still go. As he said this, he ran to his side again. His two little hands worked strenuously to massage his shoulders as he said energetically, go. He narrowed his eyes. I'm not free. Xiao Bao said bitterly. Daddy and Mommy will always go to a child's parent-teacher conference. Uncle Fu isn't my daddy. Gu Jinglian was stunned. His heart was actually touched by this resentful remark. He looked up and his gaze fell on Xiao Bao. He saw him lying on his thigh, fiddling with his fingers aggrievedly. From time to time he would look at him angrily, obviously sulking. Gu Jinglian suddenly snorted meaningfully. Haven't you always called me uncle? Xiao Bao was speechless. How can uncle go to your parent-teacher conference? Xiao Bao was speechless. Gu Jinglian picked up the brush and wrote a few more strokes. Unless you change to calling me daddy, I won't go. He knew very well that Xiao Bao would never change to call him daddy. This was because this little guy seemed to be very sensitive to Chu Ho's feelings. Although this little guy was young and clumsy in everything he did, his ability to read people's expressions was very good. It seemed that because of Chu Ho, even though he knew that he was his father, he found it difficult to change the way he addressed him and call him daddy. Daddy. Xiao Bao straightened his head and called out. Gu Jinglian's hand trembled, and the ink under his hand became distorted. He looked up in disbelief and frowned with a complicated expression, only to see little Treasure lying in front of the table with an excited expression. If he had a tail, he would definitely be like an enthusiastic puppy, wagging his tail continuously. If I call you daddy, will you attend my parent-teacher conference? Xiao Bao. The corners of Gu Jinglian's lips twitched violently. When did this rascal become so unprincipled? He thought his mouth was Smouth's mouth. He didn't expect him to change. How much did this guy want him to attend the parent-teacher conference? Gu Jinglian put down the weasel brush and lazily rested his chin on his hand. He said slowly, since you want me to go so badly, then I'll spare half a day. Half a day isn't enough. The parent-teacher conference takes a whole day. Gu Jinglian was speechless. So troublesome? Okay. It's rare. This parent-teacher conference is very, very important to me. Xiao Bao swayed his little butt and put his palms together to beg him, looking very sincere. It was as if this parent-teacher conference was really important to him. Why? Because, just as he was about to say it, he suddenly thought of something. Xiao Bao suddenly pursed his little mouth awkwardly and said, it's a secret. He couldn't tell him whose father was more handsome. Chapter 3394. If he didn't go, those kids would say that he was bragging. But he clearly wasn't bragging. If he went to the parent-teacher conference, those kids would be shocked. Gu Jinglian reluctantly agreed. I'll make an exception this time. There won't be a next time. Okay. Xiao Bao wagged his tail in joy and then said to him, then you and my mom will go together. Gu Jinglian narrowed his eyes when he heard this. What? Both of you? Xiao Bao saw his serious expression and suddenly felt uneasy. Both of you and my mom will go together. If she goes, there's no need for me to go. Gu Jinglian said coldly. Why? One person is enough to go to the parent-teacher conference. Xiao Bao puffed up his cheeks and glared at him angrily. He was obviously really sad. He stomped his feet in anger and said gloomily, I hate uncles the most. After saying that, she wiped her tears and ran away. Even though she ran far away, her miserable cries still echoed in the long corridor. Gu Jinglian's eyelids suddenly twitched violently. The next day, Xiao Bao arrived at the kindergarten. Early in the morning, he saw a group of children gathered together and excitedly passing around something that looked like a photo. Xiao Bao stuffed his little school bag under the table and sat down gloomily. He rested his chin on his hand and looked out of the window in a daze. When the chubby boy saw him, he immediately snatched the photo back from the child's hand. He walked to Xiao Bao's side and waved the photo in front of him. Xiao Bao looked away uninterestedly, his attitude cold. Last night, he cried himself to sleep under the blanket. When he woke up, his eyes were a little swollen. When Chu Ho asked, he only said perfunctorily that he didn't sleep well. However, only God knew how sad he was when Gu Jinglian said that he wasn't going to attend the parent-teacher conference. The chubby boy said, I'll show you how handsome my dad is. At the side, a group of children gathered around and chattered. I think Nuhan's father is more handsome than many of the celebrities on TV. It's such a pity that you're not a star. Exactly. If you become a celebrity, you'll definitely earn a lot of money. The fat boy turned around and said disapprovingly, how much money could a celebrity earn? My father runs a company, and he earns a few million a month. Wow! The group of little fellows exclaimed in surprise. They were all envious of him. Nuhan's father is handsome and owns a company. He's really amazing. Xiao Bao took the photo from the fat boy's hand and glanced at it. The man in the photo was very young. The background was at the entrance of a university. He was wearing a scholar's uniform. His face was indeed somewhat handsome. However, compared to Gu Jinglian, the difference was like heaven and earth. He threw the photo aside and snorted coldly. I was wondering how handsome your father was. Anyway, he's not as handsome as my father. Bragging. The chubby boy picked up the photo from the ground and said angrily, Xiao Bao, you only know how to brag. His father is definitely not as handsome as your father. Exactly. Nuhan's father is so powerful. Moreover, his name is so nice. Nuhan sounds much better than Xiao Bao Chu. Chapter 3395. When Xiao Bao heard this, he suddenly stood up agitatedly. Who said that my name is unpleasant? Xiao Bao was named by my mom. I like the name Xiao Bao. The little girl sitting in front turned around. She was a little unhappy with the chubby boy's arrogant behavior. She sided with Xiao Bao and said, Xiao Bao, didn't the teacher say that you changed your name? Guchengzi, I think it sounds much better than Nuhan. The group of children clamored. Then why were you called Xiao Bao Chu before? It's so unpleasant and feels so old-fashioned. Because Mom said that I was her precious baby. So I named myself Xiao Bao. Then why did you change your surname to Chu? And change it to Gu now? Chu is my mom's surname. Wow. Then why did you take your mom's surname? Could it be? A child laughed and said, Your mom remarried with you, right? Is this dad of yours your biological dad? It's not like what you're saying. Xiao Bao said angrily, My dad dotes on my mom. That's why he let me take my mom's surname from the beginning. So that's how it is. This reason seemed to be convincing. A child asked, Xiao Bao, do you have a picture of your dad? Xiao Bao said guiltily, No. The chubby boy said mockingly, He wouldn't dare to take it out. That's not it. Xiao Bao, when it's the parent-teacher conference, your dad will definitely come. When that time comes, won't you see Xiao Bao's dad? Don't make a fuss. The little girl in front tried her best to defend Xiao Bao. Xiao Bao looked at her gratefully and said with a smile, Thank you, Shang'er. Shang'er smiled sweetly and held her hand. It's okay, we're friends. I believe everything Xiao Bao says. Xiao Bao suddenly felt a little uneasy. If his uncle really didn't come to the parent-teacher conference, Shang'er would definitely be disappointed in him. The bell rang, and the teacher walked into the classroom. The children returned to their seats, but Xiao Bao was lost in thought. After returning home from school, Little Treasure returned to his room and sat in front of his desk with a frown on his face. Chu Ho walked over and checked the homework assigned by the teacher for him. Seeing his disappointed face, he could not help but feel strange. What happened? She felt strange. You don't seem happy these 2 days. Xiao Bao looked at her, but looked like he wanted to say something but hesitated. Chu Ho asked him again and again before he finally told him the truth. In class, the chubby boy had always been at odds with him, always going against him. However, there was indeed some conflict between the two children. Sitting in front of Xiao Bao was Shang'er. She was the prettiest and freshest girl in the class. Many boys in the class liked to get close to her. The chubby boy was no exception. Originally, Shang'er was the chubby boy's desk mate. However, boys of this age would mostly use tricks to attract girls' attention. They would bump into her from time to time in class, and sometimes they would secretly pull her hair. Shang'er was tired of him and wanted to change seats. Shang'er raised her hand and said that she did not want to be Nuhan's desk mate. Thus, the teacher moved her to sit in front of Xiao Bao. Xiao Bao was a gentlemanly child. He was very polite and was very popular with the girls in the class. Chapter 3396. Xiao Bao was also trying to vent his anger in this competition. At the same time, he also had a small wish in his heart. He hoped that Chu Ho and Gu Jinglian could attend the parent-teacher conference together like ordinary loving parents. However, he also vaguely understood that this request seemed to be a little too much. When Chu Ho heard this, she felt a little guilty. The grudge between her and Gu Jinglian was an adult matter that affected the child. She didn't expect that the impact would be so deep. Furthermore, he did not expect Xiao Bao to have such a wish all this while. She asked, Is uncle willing to go? Xiao Bao said bitterly. He seems a little unwilling. Chu Ho was stunned but didn't say anything. If Gu Jinglian was willing to go to the parent-teacher conference, even if she was unwilling, she would play the role of Mrs. Gu for Xiao Bao's sake. However, if Gu Jinglian wasn't willing, she couldn't force him to do anything. At night, Gu Jinglian was sitting in the study reading a book. Uncle Fu walked in and helped him put away the ink, paper, and inkstone. Is that guy asleep? Fu Bo nodded. She cried for a while and fell asleep with Red Lotus. Cried. Gu Jinglian looked up with a puzzled expression. What's the matter now? It's about the parent-teacher conference. Gu Jinglian was a little puzzled. It's just a parent-teacher conference. Why does he care so much? Uncle Fu cleared his throat and coughed. According to the little guy, he made a bet with a boy in class. A bet? Yes. Xiao Bao said that the boy wanted to compete with him to see whose father is more handsome. Gu Jinglian was speechless. So this was the reason? He was speechless. Old master, why don't you spare a day to accompany the little guy to the parent-teacher conference? Gu Jinglian said in a low voice. You know that I can't show my face easily. Uncle Fu was put in a difficult position. Indeed. With old master's status, it was indeed not easy for him to appear in public. When he went out, he was accompanied by a group of bodyguards. It was not for the sake of appearances, but because with his identity, if he appeared in public, it would be easy for other forces to assassinate him. The Gu family had a reputation and prestige in the capital. Although they had cleaned up some of their businesses over the years, they were still the most prosperous family in the underworld. A tall tree attracts the wind, and it's lonely at the top. Every trip was accompanied by the danger of being assassinated. Therefore, when Gu Jinglian went out, he was always accompanied by more than 10 bodyguards. If such a large group appeared on campus, it would inevitably be inappropriate. But the little guy cried for a long time, as if he was very sad. Even I felt sad when I saw that. Uncle Fu nagged. It's only a day. When the time comes, I will send people to ambush in the dark to protect old master. Moreover, if Red Lotus is by your side, you can pretend to be husband and wife with her. If you meet with an accident, she can protect you with her skills. I'm not worried about myself. Gu Jinglian put down his book and said coldly, I'm afraid that the child will be hurt. Don't worry about that. I will send people to clear the area in advance. I will send people to patrol a few miles around the school. Okay. Gu Jinglian said lightly. Then you can arrange it for me. Uncle Fu was overjoyed when he heard this. Old master, do you agree? What else? Chapter 3397. Soon, the notice for the parent-teacher conference was sent out. However, Xiao Bao crumpled it into a ball and threw it into the bin. Anyway, his uncle wouldn't come. He had made it clear that day that he found it troublesome and boring, so he definitely wouldn't come. This was nothing more than a piece of scrap paper. Thus, he didn't take this matter to heart anymore. For the past few days, the little guy had been sulking. Uncle Fu naturally didn't tell him about this and wanted to give him a surprise. On the day of the parent-teacher conference, Uncle Fu went to wake Xiao Bao up. Xiao Bao sat up in bed and rubbed his eyes. Then he saw Uncle Fu holding a brand new kindergarten uniform in front of him. Uncle Fu smiled and said, Little master, today is the parent-teacher conference. Change your clothes and quickly get up to wash your face and brush your teeth. It would have been better if he hadn't said that. Once he said that, Xiao Bao's fair and tender little face immediately wrinkled up. He pouted his little mouth bitterly, and his eyes looked as though they were about to rain. Seeing this, Uncle Fu hurriedly sat by the window and looked at him in confusion. Sweetheart? What's wrong? Don't cry, don't cry. What parent-teacher conference? Xiao Bao's tender and childish voice was full of resentment. Uncle isn't going. He's a big baddie. I've already begged him so pitifully, but he didn't give me any face. I invited him to my parent-teacher conference, but he looked unhappy. What's the point of the parent-teacher conference if he doesn't go? As he said that, he rubbed his eyes again, feeling wronged, and the rims of his eyes turned red. Uncle Fu's heart ached and he coaxed him. Oh, don't cry, don't cry. Who said that old master isn't going? Be good, don't cry. Don't worry. Old master will definitely accompany little master to the parent-teacher conference. Don't worry. You're lying. Xiao Bao complained sadly. Uncle won't go. Who said so? Uncle said it himself. That day he had already made it very clear. He won't go. Because the parent-teacher conference is boring and uninteresting, he won't go. Uncle Fu immediately hugged him and shook him. Nonsense. Old master obviously went. He's already up and downstairs for breakfast in the dining room. Really? Xiao Bao's eyes widened in shock. There were still tears in his eyes. He quickly put on his clothes. His tie was still undone and his jacket was crooked. He rushed downstairs anxiously and staggered to the dining room. He was surprised to see Gu Jinglian sitting in the dining room, eating a sandwich and casually flipping through the newspaper. Hearing footsteps, Gu Jinglian's voice Xiao Bao's lips suddenly trembled violently. He was excited and his eyes were brimming with tears. He felt inexplicably moved, and all of a sudden, he threw himself into his arms and hugged his thigh tightly. Uncle Fu, I knew you wouldn't abandon me. Gu Jinglian's lips twitched, and he furrowed his brows. What do you mean by abandon you? Uncle Fu said that you're willing to go to the parent-teacher conference. Is that true? Gu Jinglian snorted coldly, confirming that it was true. However, when he opened his eyes, he saw from the corner of his eye that the little guy in his arms looked like he was about to cry. His face stiffened, and he stared blankly at the little guy who was so touched that he was about to cry. Uncle, you're so nice. Chapter 3398. Did he think that any uncle who accompanied him to the parent-teacher conference was good? Xiao Bao sized him up and saw that he was wearing a casual shirt. He suddenly stood aside and crossed his arms to size him up. Gu Jinglian met his gaze in confusion and raised his eyebrows. What's wrong? Are you going to wear this today? Yes. Why don't you wear a shirt and a suit? It's troublesome. Moreover, for this trip, the more ordinary and casual it was, the better. Xiao Bao was not satisfied. Uncle looks more handsome in a suit. In Xiao Bao's eyes, Gu Jinglian was so handsome in a well-ironed suit that it angered the gods. Gu Jinglian clenched his fists. Give me an inch and I want a mile? Wear it. Wear it. You look so handsome in a suit. Xiao Bao begged as he wrapped his arms around him. Gu Jinglian's patience was at its limit. Just as he was about to flare up, he suddenly thought of Uncle Fu's words. Young master is so pitiful. Old master, do you know? In Xiao Bao's heart, you have always been a great figure. You can't ruin this heroic image. He held it in and did not get angry. 10 minutes later, Chu Ho changed her clothes and came downstairs. Uncle Fu had just tidied up Xiao Bao's clothes. At this moment, the little guy was sitting at the dining table and eating breakfast with relish. Uncle Fu saw her come down and smiled at her. Chu Ho was a little embarrassed and asked, "Where is he?" Old master went upstairs to change into a suit. A suit? Chu Ho was a little confused. It's just a parent-teacher conference. Why do you have to dress so formally? Xiao Bao said righteously, because uncle looks the most handsome in a suit. She was actually speechless. Soon Gu Jinglian changed into his suit and came downstairs. When he saw Chu Ho, he ignored her and walked past her into the restaurant. At that time, he had changed into a suit and stunned Xiao Bao. Xiao Bao's eyes widened, and he immediately jumped down from his seat. He circled around him and exclaimed, "Oh my God! Uncle is so handsome. I knew it. Uncle looks the most handsome in a suit." Gu Jinglian was speechless, but he was suddenly pulled to Chu Ho's side by the little girl. The two of them were forced together. Xiao Bao rubbed his chin and squinted his eyes to size them up, as if he was studying something. For a moment, Chu Ho's entire body stiffened. Gu Jinglian said coldly, "What are you looking at? Why do I feel like something's missing?" Xiao Bao urged, "Stand closer." Gu Jinglian was speechless. Chu Ho said, "Xiao Bao, stop fooling around. Other people's parents are very loving. Why are you standing together as if you're enemies?" Xiao Bao walked forward and pushed Gu Jinglian to Chu Ho's side. The tall man stood beside her, and in an instant, she felt as if the whole world had become narrow. Gu Jinglian's face was ashen. Why was it so troublesome to attend a parent-teacher conference? Did they still have to put on an act? Xiao Bao said again. Uncle, smile. No. The little boy shook his head and said sternly, "You have to change the way you address me. You can't call me uncle anymore." He walked to Gu Jinglian and held his large palm with his two small hands. He said coquettishly, "Daddy, you should hold mommy's hand. Otherwise, people will think that you have a bad relationship." As he said this, he stuffed Chu Ho's hand into Gu Jinglian's palm. Chapter 3399. Chu-ho instinctively retracted his hand, his face burning hot. Xiaobao said unhappily, "Mom, why aren't you cooperating?" He crossed his arms and turned his body to one side, looking angry. Beside him, Uncle Fu immediately winked at Chu-ho and Gu Jinglian, as if he was communicating secretly. "Just let him be." Uncle Fu mouthed a reminder. While Chu-ho was hesitating, Gu Jinglian's lips suddenly curved into a cold smile. He raised his hand and held Chu-ho's hand, but he only held it lightly and didn't hold it too tightly. From the looks of it, it was already barely enough. "Is this okay?" Gu Jinglian was already making the biggest concession. Xiaobao turned his head and looked at him seriously for a while. Suddenly, he expressed his opinion. "Uncle Dad, are you smiling or gritting your teeth? I feel that your face is a little fierce and not gentle at all." Gu Jinglian was on the verge of exploding. He wasn't a gentle person to begin with. Xiaobao pestered him and said, "Why don't you try smiling?" Chu-ho immediately squatted down and pulled Xiaobao in front of him. He patiently guided him. "Xiaobao, don't worry, Uncle, Mom and Dad will definitely perform well. At the parent-teacher conference, even if you don't remind us, we will definitely be very loving. But we're not at school yet, so don't force us, okay?" Xiaobao then nodded resentfully and said, Okay. He was already very satisfied that Gu Jinglian was willing to go to his parent-teacher conference with his mother. After breakfast, Uncle Fu sent Gu Jinglian, Chu-ho and his mother to the car. For today's trip, he had put in a lot of effort in advance. Before this, he had already sent 2 groups of people to Xiaobao's school. Along the way, there were also people secretly protecting him at all times. There would definitely be no accidents. With Uncle Fu in charge, Gu Jinglian could rest assured. Therefore, he didn't ask any more questions. The car sped away, leaving behind a trail of dust. Along the way, the car was silent. Gu Jinglian sat in the back seat with his arms crossed over his chest and his long legs crossed elegantly. Baby Chu, on the other hand, was sitting next to Chu He. He was obviously very happy, so much so that along the way his legs were kicking up and down. He was obviously in a good mood. He was humming a nursery rhyme that he learned from music lessons. His head was swaying back and forth and he was in high spirits. Chu-ho saw that he was very happy, and his heart relaxed a little. She looked up, but her gaze inadvertently met with the man sitting opposite her. Gu Jinglian's posture was relaxed. He leaned lazily against the back of the seat, but his cold gaze fell on her. She couldn't help but shudder. She turned her eyes slightly. Somehow, she felt that his gaze on her was like a sharp thorn in her back. It was already late when they arrived at the entrance of the kindergarten. There were all kinds of expensive cars parked at the entrance. All the students who enrolled in this kindergarten came from extraordinary families. They were either rich or respectable. The car stopped steadily at the entrance of the school. Gu Jinglian carried Xiaobao and got out of the car. Chu-ho carried Xiaobao's school bag and also got out of the car. She had just closed the car door when she suddenly felt that her hands were empty. She turned around in surprise and saw that Gu Jinglian had taken his school bag. He carried Xiaobao in his left hand and held his school bag in his right. When Chu-ho saw this, she immediately said, "Let me carry Xiaobao." "No need." Gu Jinglian turned around and slowly entered the school with the crowd. Chapter 3400. As he passed by, the other students looked at him in surprise as he walked toward the school gate. It was not because of his stunning good looks but because of the aura he exuded. It was inviolable, sharp, and had an inviolable elegance. "Oh my God! Is this man a parent too? He's so handsome. He was born with a celebrity face. No way! He's so young. I can't tell that he's already a father. Also, did you notice that he looks like a celebrity? I remember now. Is that celebrity called Gu Xingze? Now that you mention it, I noticed it too. They do look alike. But their auras are different. Comparisons are odious. They're both children in the middle class, but look at mine. His belly is so big." A group of people looked at Gu Jinglian's back and whispered among themselves. Chu-ho was stunned for a moment, then followed him nervously. At the school gate, the crowd was surging. Gu Jinglian carried Xiaobao until they entered the school gate. Then he put Xiaobao down. At this moment, The parents in the corridor were in a hurry as they followed their children to their respective classes. Xiao Bao was in the first classroom on the third floor. The classes were assigned according to the names of the flowers. He was in the sunflower class, which meant that he was the son of light and the son of heaven. Along the way, it was inevitable that they would be delayed because of the crowd. When Gu Jinglian and Chu Ho followed Xiao Bao to the classroom door, Xiao Bao passed by the window and saw that most of the parents were already seated. He seemed to be a little late. Gu Jinglian saw him standing at the side of the classroom and hesitating to enter. He frowned and asked, "What's the matter? We seem to be late." Xiao Bao said awkwardly, "You're going to be late. Why aren't you going in?" Chu Ho urged angrily. This guy was so stupid sometimes that it made people angry. Xiao Bao nodded and ran into the classroom. Standing at the door, he pinched the corner of his shirt and said shyly, "Teacher, good morning." As soon as he finished speaking, he was stunned by the scene before him. In the huge classroom there was a group of people. Other than him, all the parents of the children had already arrived and were seated. There were 7 rows of tables and chairs in the classroom, and each table had 2 seats. The children sat on the seats while their parents sat beside them, forming a small triangle. However, the funny thing was that because it was a middle shift, the seats were very short. This was just right for children, but for many parents it was too narrow and short, not to mention Gu Jinglian's imposing height. The fat boy saw him at a glance and suddenly stood up. He said proudly, "Xiao Bao, you're here. Where are your parents?" He was so arrogant that he seemed to be waiting to see him make a fool of himself. Xiao Bao looked beside him and saw a man dressed in a suit. He was dressed very formally, and even his hair was carefully combed. He sat beside the fat boy. He looked young and handsome, and compared to the other parents, he was indeed the one who stood out. When Nuhan's father walked into the classroom just now, he had caused quite a commotion. It was no doubt because among all the children's parents, the fat boy's father was indeed the most handsome. Chapter 3401. Many of the children were very excited. They surrounded Nuhan's father and looked at him with admiration. Some even said, "Xiao Bao isn't here yet. He must be too embarrassed to come. His father can't be compared to Nuhan's father. That's right. Look at him, he came alone." He was still talking about how handsome his father was. He must be bragging. Nuhan's father is the most handsome. I'm so envious of Nuhan. If only I had such a handsome father. And Nuhan's father is so powerful. I saw his father drive a luxurious car here today. Also, Nuhan's family is very rich. His father's company makes millions every month. Nuhan's face was even more pleased with himself. He crossed his arms and looked at Xiao Bao arrogantly. How was it? He couldn't be compared to him. Now, all the children in the class thought that his father was the most handsome. Let's see what this stupid Xiao Bao can do. The chubby boy provoked him with contemptuous eyes from time to time. Xiao Bao was so angry that his face turned red. The teacher looked at him and asked curiously, "Xiao Bao, where are your parents?" Before Xiao Bao could speak, Gu Jinglian held Chu Ho's hand and walked past the classroom window. His tall and slender figure attracted the attention of all the parents and children in the class immediately. Some of the children stared at him with their eyes wide open. Many of the parents were also shocked. This man was really too tall. Just by looking at him, he was about 1.9 meters tall. They didn't know if it was because of his height, but his aura was intimidating. His every move had the aura of a magnificent army, looking down on all living things. Gu Jinglian and Chu Ho walked to the door and stood behind Xiao Bao. Chu Ho smiled and said, "Hello, teacher." The teacher was stunned. "You are?" Without waiting for Chu Ho and Gu Jinglian to introduce them, Xiao Bao immediately said, "Teacher Xue, this is my father and mother." Gu Jinglian responded with a cold smile, appearing polite but indifferent. "Sorry I'm late." Teacher Xue was shocked speechless. When the fat boy saw Gu Jinglian, his mouth opened so wide that he could swallow several eggs. His eyes widened as he stared at Gu Jinglian in disbelief. Were they Xiao Bao's parents? Liar. Impossible. At this moment, the chubby boy was completely stunned by Gu Jinglian's astonishingly handsome appearance. Xiao Bao's appearance belonged to the cute type. Therefore, the chubby boy had imagined what Xiao Bao's parents looked like. But he never would have thought that Xiaobao's father would be so handsome. Gu Jinglian's facial features were more feminine. His facial features were cold and elegant, but they carried a kind of invasive beauty. However, his facial features were very handsome and upright. He had sword-like eyebrows, phoenix eyes, a high nose bridge, and thin lips. This was a beauty that could destroy the world. It had nothing to do with gender. Even if it was a man in front of such an arrogant man, they would feel ashamed of their inferiority. This kind of man was not usually seen in real life. He could only be seen on television. However, even Gu Xingze, who was once known as the beauty of the century, would pale in comparison to him. If the two of them stood together, it would be difficult to tell who was better. Chapter 3402. Gu Xingze was a rare beauty in the entertainment industry. It was a pity that he had passed away at such a young age. However, this man's eyes and eyebrows bore some resemblance to Gu Xingze's. The most outrageous thing was that this man was shockingly young. Just by looking at his face, one could tell that he wasn't even 28 years old. And the woman standing next to Gu Jinglian was Xiaobao's mother. Perhaps with Gu Jinglian in front of her, the second look at her was not as stunning as before, but she was definitely a woman with delicate features. Her eyebrows had a heroic spirit that ordinary women didn't have. Her facial features were beautiful but serious. Although she tried her best to appear gentle, as someone from the Interpol, she had a dignified aura that couldn't be ignored. Teacher? Xiaobao saw that Teacher Shui was still in a daze and tried to call out to her a few times. Teacher Shui came back to her senses and immediately said, "You must be Xiaobao's parents. Please return to your seat. The parent-teacher conference is about to start." Gu Jinglian held Xiaobao's hand and returned to their seats with Chu Ho under everyone's shocked gazes. After Xiaobao sat down, Gu Jinglian and Chu Ho ran into some difficulties. Although the chairs that the parents were sitting on were especially high, Gu Jinglian's tall and slender body was still stretched out when he sat down. Chu Ho had no choice but to stand up awkwardly and move the table slightly. Only then did the two tall people have a small space to sit. A few of the parents couldn't help but mumble in surprise, "They're so tall. I feel that it's quite uncomfortable for them to sit in such a small space. The couple is so tall and so good-looking. When the child grows up, he'll definitely be very tall too." Shang'er turned around and looked at Xiaobao. She praised sincerely. "Xiaobao, your father is really handsome. Much more handsome than Nuhan's father." Xiaobao smirked proudly, but was immediately embarrassed by the compliment. Blushing, she said, "Of course my dad is handsome." Children did not understand hypocrisy and modesty. Even if they were embarrassed to be praised, they would still happily accept it. Gu Jinglian frowned. There were many ways for young masters to compete with each other. However, this was the first time his own son had compared him to see whose father was more handsome. He didn't particularly care about his appearance, but because he had a serious obsession with cleanliness, he always took care of himself. Coupled with his exceptional looks and height, it could be said that he was particularly conspicuous among the group of parents. Miss Shui stood on the podium and smiled at the audience. "Dear parents, hello. First of all, please allow me, on behalf of all the teachers and students of Sunflower Class, to extend our warm welcome and sincere thanks to all the parents present today." Miss Shui was giving a speech on the podium. However, below the podium, whether it was the parents or the children, all of them were secretly sizing up Gu Jinglian. Chu Ho sat in his seat and felt the gazes from all around him. For a moment, he felt as if he was sitting on pins and needles and felt uncomfortable all over. She used to be a criminal police officer. Whether it was in the past or now, she didn't like the feeling of being watched in disguise. Especially Nuahan's father, who kept nagging Gu Jinglian to look in her direction. Chu Ho raised his eyebrows unhappily and followed his line of sight to glare at him. Chapter 3403. Gu Jinglian was speechless. "What kind of game is this? I'm not playing." Chu Ho's eyebrows twitched. Just as he was about to say something, Teacher Shui called out from the podium, "Little you. Clap, clap, clap." The group of children patted each other's shoulders enthusiastically. Some of the more clumsy children were slower to react. When they heard Little Yu's command, they slapped their thighs. Even though the parents felt awkward and felt that this game was extremely childish, they still had to cooperate with their children. Therefore, they responded sparsely. Only Gu Jinglian sat in his seat and did not move at all. Teacher Shui laughed and said, Xiao Bao's father is not keeping up with everyone's rhythm. Gu Jinglian raised his eyebrows impatiently. Damn it. Xiao Bao laughed and said mockingly, Daddy, you're so stupid. You don't even know how to play such a simple game. Gu Jinglian glared at him. Shut up. Xiao Bao obediently shut his mouth. Shonger, who was sitting in front, saw this and mumbled, Xiao Bao, your father is so fierce. Really? My father never dares to be fierce to me. Gu Jinglian saw the two children looking at each other and whispering to each other. Behind him, Chu Ho poked him with his finger and said angrily, Are you here for a parent-teacher conference or just sitting around? Since you're already here, don't put on airs. Gu Jinglian said coldly, Why didn't I hear about such a stupid game before coming here? Xiao Bao moved closer to him and whispered, Daddy, don't be embarrassed. Otherwise, everyone will think that you're stupid for not knowing how to play such a simple game. Gu Jinglian looked around. Just as Xiao Bao said, seeing that he was sitting still, the other children whispered, Xiao Bao's father is so stupid. He doesn't even know how to play such a simple game. Shame on him. No wonder Xiao Bao was born so stupid. Gu Jinglian glanced over coldly. The child who said that Xiao Bao was stupid immediately had his mouth covered by his mother. Shoo! Don't say it. How dare he call his son stupid? It's starting. Chu Ho nudged him. Teacher Shui gave another command. Rainstorm. Da-da-da. A group of people stomped their feet. Gu Jinglian was caught between a rock and a hard place. He stepped on it symbolically, but his face darkened. Chu Ho tried his best to hold back his laughter. Only the heavens knew how interesting it was for this man to play such a childish game. His face was especially dark, as if he was about to explode at any moment. It seemed that only during Xiao Bao's parent-teacher conference would there be such an opportunity for this demon king to play such a childish game with a bunch of little kids. Moderate rain. Pa pa pa. Xiao yu. Pa pa pa. Rainstorm. Da da da. The earth quaked and the mountains shook. During the break, Gu Jinglian leaned against the wall in the corridor with an ashen face. His almond-shaped eyes were gloomy. Xiao Bao stood pitifully beside him and said innocently, All right, Daddy, don't be angry. Next time I won't let you play such a boring game. There won't be a next time. The chubby boy pulled Li Xianlai to the corridor and saw Xiao Bao hugging Gu Jinglian's long legs. The chubby boy pointed at Xiao Bao and said, Daddy, that's him. His name is Gu Changza. He's been bullying me. Chapter 3404. The chubby boy nodded and waited for his father to stand up for him. Li Xianlai walked up to Gu Jinglian and greeted him with a smile. You're Gu Changza's father, aren't you? Gu Jinglian looked up and glanced at him. His icy gaze swept over him before he smirked coldly. What's the matter? It's nothing special. I just wanted to meet my rumored competitor. Li Xianlai said casually. Children don't know any better and are actually competing over such childish things. Do you know what the two of them are doing compared to us? I've always heard from my son that your Xiao Bao said that you're the most handsome father in the world. It made me a little curious too. However, now that I've seen you in person, you really live up to your reputation. Gu Jinglian's reaction was very cold. He was a man of few words, so he didn't respond to Li Xianlai's greetings and only smiled coldly. It was obvious that he didn't care. As a result, Li Xianlai was extremely embarrassed and couldn't find a way out. His expression suddenly became a little unhappy. Usually in the company, it was only his subordinates who complimented him. He didn't care about other people's expressions. Li Xianlai purposely picked on Gu Jinglian not only for his son's reputation, but also for his own reputation. He said, I don't think I've heard you mention before. What do you do for a living? Gu Jinglian said coldly, That's not for you to ask about. Li Xianlai suddenly felt suffocated again. Gu Jinglian's tone was neither cold nor warm. Although his words were concise and comprehensive, the arrogance in his words couldn't be concealed at all. It made Li Xianlai extremely embarrassed. He snorted coldly and said, I didn't expect you to be so arrogant. It seems like you've been in power for a long time, so you speak with such an arrogant tone. If you ask me, there's no shortage of important people here. Most of the people who can send their children to this kindergarten are worth tens of millions or more. Even if you really have some background, you don't have to be so arrogant, right? These words were a classic example of hitting the nail on the head. Gu Jinglian was already fuming because of the boring conversation just now. He said coldly, "Do I need to ask for your opinion on my attitude and emphasis?" When Xiaobao saw this, he couldn't help but worry that Gu Jinglian would make things difficult for Li. He immediately said, "Dad, don't be angry. Don't stoop to his level. Let's go into the classroom." With that, he held Gu Jinglian's hand and walked into the classroom. Li Xianlai was so angry that he stomped his feet. Gu Jinglian's arrogant attitude had completely angered him. If it wasn't for the school, he would have flared up. Mother ***, what the hell is this? What are you so arrogant for? Li Xianlai planned to give this guy a good taste of his medicine. That. And parents. 2. Calm. The. Oh. 3 people for legs. The rules of the 3-person, 4-person leg-tied race were relatively simple. The parents and children were in one group, and each group had one leg tied together with a cloth bag. The bag was tied above the ankle joint and the calf near the knee. Then they stood up and started running at the same time. In the end, the first one to reach the finish line was the winner. Chapter 3405. When Chu Ho was working at the Public Security Bureau, he had come across this game at an event held by the Bureau. However, Gu Jinglian had never heard of it. They were in the second group for the preliminary round. The 3 of them stood in a row with Chu Ho on the left and him on the right. Xiaobao was naturally in the middle. However, Gu Jinglian and Chu Ho were really too tall. Xiaobao couldn't even hug their waists when he stood in the middle. Xiaobao didn't have much confidence. He felt that this game was really too difficult. However, there was a prize for first place. A super big doll. Xiaobao liked it very much. Children of his age had almost no resistance to furry toys. As a prize, it was different from buying one himself. A prize meant honor. Xiaobao naturally looked forward to it. Hence he asked Chu Ho, "Mom, can we win?" Chu Ho glanced at Gu Jinglian, then looked at Xiaobao and said, "It's not a problem to win, as long as your dad doesn't drag us down." Gu Jinglian heard this and snorted disdainfully. He said mockingly, "Who's the one dragging us down?" Xiaobao whimpered and tugged at Gu Jinglian's sleeve. "Dad, you have to win. I heard that the prize is a very big toy." Gu Jinglian raised his eyebrows. His tone was unusually gentle. "Got it." Teacher Shui raised her whistle and swept her gaze around. When she saw that all the parents and children were ready, she clapped her hands and said, "Is everyone ready?" "Ready." "Then, let's invite the parents to bring their children to the finish line." Teacher Shui counted down. Accompanied by a loud whistle, a group of parents brought their children to the finish line with great difficulty. The rules were simple, but the game was difficult to play. Not only did it test the tacit understanding between parents and children, but due to the difference in height, if the steps of the parents were too big, the children would inevitably not be able to keep up. They might even fall. The fat boy was in the same group. As soon as he whistled, the 3 of them rushed to the finish line in a flurry. The father and son were eager to win. When they were close to the finish line, their steps were hurried and they dragged the little fellow down with them. They were in quite a sorry state. In the beginning, Gu Jinglian could not coordinate with Chu Ho. The 2 of them carried Xiaobao and stumbled. The main reason was that Gu Jinglian was too tall, which became his biggest disadvantage. He had always been arrogant, so it was impossible for him to cooperate with Chu Ho. Chu Ho tried to cooperate with him. In the end, he barely managed to reach the finish line in second place in the group and entered the finals. Xiaobao cheered, feeling that he was one step closer to victory. However, Chu Ho despised it to death. "You're so clumsy." Gu Jinglian was originally at a disadvantage. His desire to live had been aroused, so he was a little unhappy. When he heard her say that, his expression became a little dangerous. "Who are you calling clumsy?" I said. "Mom is talking about me." Xiaobao stood between them and said with a head full of cold sweat, "Mom must be saying that I'm clumsy." Gu Jinglian was speechless. Chu Ho was speechless. Xiaobao complained, "Sai, it's all my fault. I'm so clumsy that I dragged you guys down to get first place." Don't stumble in the finals, Chuho said. Otherwise Xiao Bao's first place will be gone, Gu Jinglian said. Don't worry. Chapter 3406. When they were preparing for the finals, Gu Jinglian tied up his legs. Suddenly, he thought of something and hugged Xiao Bao's shoulder. With his lift, Xiao Bao was lifted up a little and was almost lifted into the air. When Chuho saw this, he immediately understood his intention and hugged Xiao Bao's other shoulder. The two of them were carrying Xiao Bao in their arms. This way they only had to worry about the coordination of their feet. Gu Jinglian said, I'll use my right leg first, you use your left leg first. Chuho nodded and said, Okay. As soon as the whistle blew, Gu Jinglian narrowed his eyes and took a step forward. Chuho also moved. This time the two of them cooperated exceptionally well. They took turns to kick and were terrifyingly coordinated. The group of people watched as the two of them instantly left the team behind them more than 10 meters behind and strode towards the finish line. In the end, the two of them felt that walking was too slow and actually started running. They approached the finish line like a whirlwind. Oh my God! Look at them, they're actually carrying the child. They're so strong. Some parents wanted to imitate them, but the men were fine. However, most of the mothers could not lift their children. Instead, they were flustered and embarrassed. While many parents were still struggling at the starting point, Gu Jinglian and Chuho had already carried Xiao Bao across the finish line. Teacher Shui blew the whistle in shock and announced the winner. First place Gu Changza. The chubby boy was so angry that he could only stare. He said angrily, It's all Daddy's fault. He let Xiao Bao steal the limelight. I can't accept this. Li Xianlai was also not in a good mood. After being ridiculed by his son, he was even angrier. In the end, the other parents' teams also reached the finish line one after another. The second and third places were also decided. Shonger was very happy to be in third place. On the podium, Gu Changza stood on the highest step with his hands behind his back. He looked proud. Shonger said enviously, Xiao Bao, your parents are so awesome. Of course. Xiao Bao patted his chest proudly and said, My mom used to be a police officer. She can subdue a strong man to the ground with one hand. So powerful? Shonger was dumbstruck. Teacher Shui came over to give out the prizes. The second and third place prizes were stationary. There were crayons and cartoon sharpeners. The first place prize was a meter-long doll. Xiao Bao was so happy that he hugged her tightly and grinned from ear to ear. Standing below the stage, Gu Jinglian looked at the little guy on the stage. The ice on his face finally broke and a slight smile appeared on his lips. Chuho inadvertently caught a glimpse of the smile on his lips. He was startled for a moment before curling his lips into a smile as well. When the parent-teacher conference ended, Xiao Bao was still reluctant to leave. Today was probably the happiest day of his life. There was Daddy, Mommy, and him. In the end, the three of them competed in a competition and even won a prize. Everything that he had never dared to imagine had actually happened. It was so happy that it felt surreal. When they left the kindergarten and walked to the parking lot, Xiao Bao was hugging the heavy doll. Chuho offered to help him carry it, but he was reluctant to let go. Mommy, I'll carry it. Xiao Bao hugged the doll like it was a treasure, his face beaming. This is Xiao Bao's prize. No one can snatch it from me. Chapter 3407. Before he could finish speaking, a shadow flashed past him. Little chubby boy appeared out of nowhere and slammed him onto the ground. Xiao Bao was caught off guard and was knocked to the ground. Immediately after, his arms were empty. The toy had been snatched away by Nuahan. Gu Jinglian turned around and saw Xiao Bao on the ground. Chuho immediately went forward and picked up Xiao Bao. Xiao Bao was in pain from the fall, but he held it in and did not cry. When he looked over, he saw that little chubby boy had already snatched his toy away and was holding it in his arms. Li Xianlai and Nuahan's mother were standing at the side, looking at them with gratification, as if tacitly allowing their child to do so. Gu Jinglian's face darkened. Chuho was furious. He shielded Xiao Bao in his arms and said coldly, What do you mean by this? Are you condoning your child to snatch someone else's toy? Nuahan's mother said disapprovingly, What do you mean by snatching? The child is not sensible. It's not as serious as you make it out to be. Isn't this snatching? Taking something without permission is called stealing in the dark and snatching in the open. Nuahan's mother heard this and was quite angry. She said angrily to Nuahan, "Nuahan, return the toy to him. What kind of toy do you want? Mommy will go to the counter and buy it for you. Why do you want someone else's toy?" Nuahan pouted and said, "I don't want it. I want this. I like it." Xiao Bao complained angrily, "If you like it, why don't you win it back with your own ability? Mommy and I won this toy. Return it to me." "I'm not returning it." Nuahan also replied angrily, who asked Xiao Bao to steal all the limelight at the parent-teacher conference today. Little Fatty was so angry that he couldn't vent his anger. Nuahan's mother saw this and immediately said to Chu Ho, "It's just a toy. How much is it? I'll buy it." Then, she took out a Chanel wallet from her bag and fiddled with it as if she was fishing for money. Buy it with money? Ha! To Xiao Bao, the value of this toy could not be measured by money. In the eyes of such a young child, there was no concept of money at all, only sacred honor. In the eyes of a child, a few $100 bills were not even as valuable as a few red flowers on the blackboard. Buy with money? Who was this woman insulting? What's more, how much could this toy be worth? It could be bought outside for a few hundred yuan, but in Xiao Bao's eyes it wouldn't even be sold for a few million yuan. Xiao Bao said, "Who wants your money? I won this toy and it belongs to me. Give it back to me." As he spoke, he broke free from Chu Ho's arms and rushed in front of Nuahan. He was not afraid of his strong physique. Little Fatty was taller than Nuahan, so he was naturally stronger than Xiao Bao. Therefore, he did not put a little bean like Xiao Bao in his eyes. When he saw Xiao Bao running over to take the toy back, he did not even look and pushed him. However, he did not expect that Xiao Bao had come prepared. Instead, he fiercely returned a punch. The reason why he was so easily hit by him before was because of Nuahan's sneak attack. He was not prepared at all, so he was caught off guard and fell to the ground. But now he was prepared. Moreover, when he was at the Gu family, Uncle Fu did not train him for nothing. Chapter 3408. Usually he looked cute and adorable, but that was because he was gentle. Uncle Fu had also taught him not to fight with other children. Hence he looked like he was easy to bully. But in reality, with one punch Nuahan fell to the ground. Taking advantage of this moment, Xiao Bao reached out to grab the toy in his arms. Seeing that his precious son was being bullied, how could Li Xianlai let it go? Thus he walked over and stretched out his leg to kick Xiao Bao. Fighting between children was a matter between children. As an adult he could only stop it. But not only did Li Xianlai intervene, he even wanted to kick Xiao Bao. How could a child's strength be compared to an adult's? Before Chu Ho could react, Gu Jinglian had already strode forward, grabbed Li Xianlai's collar, and pulled him in front of him. "You're asking for death." He threw a punch and directly knocked Li Xianlai to the ground. His back hit the concrete floor hard, and the pain made his face turn red as he arched his back. Chu Ho widened his eyes in shock. He couldn't believe it. She had followed Gu Jinglian for so long, but she had never seen him fight personally. He had a serious obsession with cleanliness, so he never fought with others. Moreover, he had many bodyguards around him, so it was not his turn to fight. This time, however, was an exception. Because the movement was too big, his clothes were a little messy. Gu Jinglian tugged at his tie expressionlessly and glanced at him coldly. Beside him, Nuahan was so scared that she cried. Nuahan's mother pointed at her angrily and said, "Why are you hitting people?" She directly pointed her finger at him with her head held high. But this really violated his taboo. He hated it when people pointed at him with their fingers. Gu Jinglian said coldly, "I don't hit women." Chu Ho smiled coldly and walked forward. She grabbed Nuahan's mother's outstretched finger and twisted it gently. With a crack, the finger was broken. Nuahan's mother knelt on the ground weakly. Her face was contorted in pain, and she cried herself hoarse, as if she wanted to use her cries to attract others. When the fat boy saw this, he cried even louder. However, even though the mother and son were crying so hard, no one approached them. The huge parking lot seemed to be isolated from the rest of the world. Little did they know that Gu Jinglian's men had already sealed off the parking lot. All the parents were blocked outside and could not enter. Moreover, they did not know what was going on. Gu Jinglian walked in front of Li Xianlai expressionlessly. He lifted his long legs in disgust and lifted Li Xianlai's chin with the tip of his leather shoes. His cold gaze swept over Li Xianlai. What are you doing? Li Xianlai was frightened by the cold sharpness of his body. He had never seen a man with such a terrifying aura. Gu Jinglian hated his face. He kicked his face to the side and said coldly, "You spoil my appetite." "What did you say? If you don't know how to discipline your child, do you need my help?" Gu Jinglian said casually. "By the way, I'll teach you some rules." "What do you mean?" "I don't like to talk nonsense with people. It's fine if you don't understand." Gu Jinglian squatted down and carried Xiao Bao in his arms. He stood up and said to Chu Ho, "Let's go." Chu Ho nodded and followed him into the car. Chapter 3409. Li Xianlai was still confused. He looked in the direction of his departing figure, and saw Gu Jinglian carrying Xiao Bao, and getting into a Rolls-Royce Phantom with Chu Ho. He recognized the limited edition Phantom, which was worth tens of millions. However, he realized that the license plate of the car was actually 5/8. He still remembered that this special license plate was not something that could be measured by money. Without a special background, it was impossible to get such a license plate number. The Phantom slowly drove out of the parking lot. A number of black Audi A8s followed behind and escorted them away. Li Xianlai was speechless. He did not know who this man was. How could he travel in such a grand manner? Could it be that he really had an extraordinary background? Not long after the car left the parking lot, Li Xianlai did not have time to comfort his wife and children when he saw a group of men in suits coming over. He subconsciously protected Nuhan in his arms, only to see them pass by him and walk towards his car. He had specially driven a Porsche over today. It was worth millions. This car was even bought with a mortgage. However, he saw the men in black suits surrounding the car. Although they were unarmed, their aggressive posture made Li Xianlai extremely nervous. "What are you doing?" Just as he finished speaking, he heard a voice. "Smash it." Li Xianlai sucked in a breath of cold air and immediately rushed over, only to see a few men in black facing his Porsche, ruthlessly kicking. These people were all well-trained fighters. Not to mention that they were unarmed. Even a casual punch from them was enough to shatter his car window. "Stop!" Li Xianlai was so anxious that his eyes were about to burst. He rushed over, only to see the men kicking and punching the car door and bumper into pieces. A few places were dented. The car window shattered into snowflakes. Some of them even exploded. The windshield wipers were also broken. Even the glass was smashed beyond recognition. Two men rushed over with iron rods in their hands and started smashing the car. Nuhan's mother was so frightened that she screamed. Li Xianlai was so anxious that he stomped his feet. However, due to the large number of people, he did not dare to stop them. He could only watch helplessly as they smashed and smashed his beloved vehicle. Nuhan's mother pushed him and said, "What are they doing? Hurry up and call the police." "Are you crazy?" Li Xianlai turned around and glared at her. "Can't you see? They are all from the Hay Society. Call the police. Go to hell." Then what should we do?" Li Xianlai gritted his teeth, but he could not think of a way. In just a few minutes, he could only watch helplessly as his vehicle was smashed into scrap metal. In the end, he could not find a single complete piece. After smashing his car into scrap metal, these people left quickly. Before they left, they said, "This is just a warning, this is just a warning, this is just a warning. Be sensible, you hear me?" With that said, the group's mother's father, Nuhan, was scared out of her wits. Nuhan's mother looked at the smashed car and wanted to cry. She mumbled, "What should we do? Who are they?" "I guess." Li Xianlai's breathing became uneven. "I guess they are probably Xiao Bao's father's men." Chapter 3410. Nuhan's mother was so frightened that she started babbling incoherently. "But these people are obviously from the Hay Society. Don't tell me. Stop talking." Li Xianlai finally lost his temper. "Do you think the situation isn't chaotic enough?" Nuhan's mother was so frightened that she kept quiet. The fat boy just sat on the ground, crying himself hoarse. Li Xianlai was even more upset and kicked the car hard as a way of venting his anger. On the way back to the Gu residence, Xiaobao hugged the doll. His eyes were still red, but he stubbornly did not shed a single tear. However, along the way he hugged the doll lovingly. Gradually his mood brightened. Gu Jinglian looked at him. Seeing that he had quickly forgotten about the unhappiness earlier, he did not take it to heart. Chuho smiled and asked, "Is this doll that fun?" "Xiaobao likes it." Xiaobao smiled and said, "This is a prize that we won together." As he said this, he said excitedly to Gu Jinglian, "Uncle, you were so awesome today. Everyone was so envious of me. Humph, that was so satisfying. I told you, you're the most handsome person in the world." Chu Ho was amused by his childish words. "This guy." Gu Jinglian raised his eyebrows. Noticing the way he addressed him, he said unhappily, "You changed your way of addressing me just like that?" He had changed his way of addressing him as uncle when they left the school. This kid. The little guy was a little guilty. He was also good at reading people's expressions. He carefully glanced at Chu Ho. Seeing that she was all smiles and did not seem to have any objections, he mumbled, "Daddy, you're so unwilling. No one's forcing you." Xiaobao immediately moved towards him, nudged him and smiled obsequiously. "No, Uncle. Daddy, don't mind it. I'm just used to it. I didn't see you not used to it in school." He kept addressing him as Daddy, as if he was afraid that others would not know that he was his father. Xiaobao said guiltily, "No." He was afraid that Chu Ho would take issue with him. If his mother didn't mind, he was more willing to call him father. After all, they had been together for such a long time. It would be a lie if they didn't have any feelings for each other. However, they didn't rely on him like other children rely on their fathers. Gu Jinglian snorted coldly and put an arm around his shoulder. His voice became gentler. "Are you happy today?" "I'm happy. How could such a young child know how to lie?" He said sincerely. Today is the happiest day of Xiaobao's life. When Chu Ho heard this, he felt upset. Ever since he was young, Xiaobao was filled with curiosity and yearning for a father. Xiaobao did not have a father since he was young, so he was ostracized by his peers. Many children attacked him, saying that he had a mother to give birth to but no father to raise him. This had always been Xiaobao's sad past. However, it was different now. In front of so many children, Xiaobao had gained enough face. With such a cool father like Gu Jinglian, it was indescribable how proud he was. Who would have thought that such a young child would know how to be proud and have some vanity? But it was this little bit of vanity that was so easily satisfied. For a moment, Chu Ho felt a little guilty. He felt that he owed Xiaobao too much during his childhood. As soon as he got home, Xiaobao held up the plushie and his beloved spoils of war, and went to Uncle Fu to show off. Chapter 34:11. Chu Ho and Gu Jinglian got out of the car. Uncle Fu came up to them with Xiaobao in his arms. He looked at Gu Jinglian with a smile, then at Chu Ho. He asked cheerfully, "How was it? Was Xiaobao's parent-teacher conference interesting?" Gu Jinglian frowned. He suddenly thought of the stupid games they played at the parent-teacher conference and his face turned gloomy. Chu Ho also thought of the unpleasant things that happened before they left. He did not look happy either. "Boring. Boring," the two of them said almost at the same time. After that, they went back to their respective rooms. Uncle Fu carried Xiaobao in a daze and stood there in a mess. In the study, Gu Jinglian stood by the bed and looked at the courtyard through the window. Xiaobao was playing with the doll by the pool. Beside him stood a few burly men. Although these thugs had fierce faces, when they looked at Xiaobao, their gazes were full of affection. Ever since Xiaobao had settled down in the Gu family, he seemed to have become the Gu family's mascot. Everyone liked him very much. These tough men had always fought and killed their way through, living a life of blood on the tip of the blade. However, when facing Xiaobao, their warmest side was also stimulated. Children were like animals. They were very innocent and could stimulate the affection deep in people's hearts. Someone knocked on the door. Uncle Fu pushed the door open and walked in with tea and snacks in his hands. He saw Gu Jinglian standing by the window and placed the snacks on the table. Uncle Fu walked up to him. "Old master, you must be tired today." Gu Jinglian's gaze fell on Xiaobao through the window. He saw him holding the doll and laughing heartily at the thugs. revealing his cute little rabbit teeth. He looked so innocent. A doting smile gradually appeared on the man's face, which was usually cold and aloof. Uncle Fu heard him speak and curiously followed his gaze. He realized that he was staring at Xiao Bao and immediately said, "Xiao Bao is very happy today. I can tell that he especially likes this doll. This is not like the ones bought outside. Old master won this doll for him. He treasures it so much." Gu Jinglian's smile deepened. When Fu Bo saw him smile, he understood in his heart that even though master usually did not show his emotions in reality, he doted on Xiao Bao very much. Gu Jinglian noticed that Uncle Fu was secretly laughing at him. His smile disappeared and he returned to his usual cold expression. He returned to his desk and picked up the teacup. He gently lifted the lid gently and took a sip and ordered him coldly, "Check someone for me." "Yes, old master." He put down the teacup and said in a cold voice, "Li, go first." "This person. What's wrong with him?" Uncle Fu was a little surprised. Did he offend old master in any way? "Check on this person's background." "Yes." Uncle Fu accepted the order and immediately left. In the middle of the night, Gu Jinglian finished his work and was about to go to bed after taking a shower. He suddenly thought of something and groped his way to Xiao Bao's room. However, the room was cold and empty. Under the moonlight, he saw that there was no one on the bed. Xiao Bao was not in his room. He left the room and passed by Chu Ho's room. He stopped in his tracks and turned around. He gently turned the doorknob and pushed the door open. In the huge bedroom, Chu Ho was lying on the bed with his arm around Xiao Bao. He was originally breathing lightly and was sound asleep. Chapter 34:12. Before he fell asleep, he did not forget to hug the doll tightly in his arms. He loved it so much that he could not bear to part with it. When she saw this, she felt helpless and did not know whether to laugh or cry, so she simply let him be. In a daze, she caught a glimpse of movement. She opened her eyes abruptly and looked in the direction of the sound. In the darkness, she saw a tall and slender figure standing quietly in front of the bed. The moonlight shone at his feet. When he saw that she had woken up, he raised his finger slightly and placed it between his lips, indicating that she should not make any noise and wake the child up. She did not know when Gu Jinglian had entered the room and walked to the side of the bed. She was careless. In the past, even the slightest movement would wake her up immediately. Unexpectedly this time she only woke up when he was close to the bed. It seemed that her sense of danger had deteriorated after staying in the Gu family for so many days. She only woke up after he walked in for so long. Gu Jinglian looked down and saw Xiao Bao sleeping soundly in Chu Ho's arms with a contented expression on his face. His two arms were wrapped tightly around the doll. Even though he was sleeping, he could not bear to let go of the doll. How much did he like this doll? But in Gu Jinglian's eyes, this doll was so ugly that it could not even be compared to him. He slowly sat sideways by the bed and sized him up. As he looked at Xiao Bao's chubby and fair little face, he could not help but have the urge to tease him. He reached out his slender fingers and gently pinched Xiao Bao's nose. When Chu Ho saw this, the corners of his lips twitched violently. He did not expect this man to have such a wicked sense of humor. In his sleep, Xiao Bao suddenly felt that he could not breathe. His little mouth opened with a puffed sound. He breathed through his mouth, but he did not wake up. This guy was really in a deep sleep. Gu Jinglian could not help but feel that this guy was especially cute only when he was asleep. At least it was quiet. When the little guy's eyes were closed, his thick eyelashes were very obvious all of a sudden. Gu Jinglian leaned closer and gently stroked his eyelashes with his fingers. Even in his sleep, the little fellow sensed something strange coming from his eyelids. Subconsciously, he waved his hands and kicked the doll in his arms to the ground. As he spoke, his temper was quite bad. Gu Jinglian pinched his cheeks. The doll was kicked to the ground, and Xiao Bao now had a place for him. Chu Ho watched helplessly as he lay down beside Xiao Bao. For a moment he felt uncomfortable all over. Is he going to sleep here tonight? Chu Ho felt that his limbs were a little stiff, to the extent that he could not help but pull back his arm that was holding on to Xiao Bao, afraid that he would come into contact with him. Gu Jinglian caught a glimpse of her uneasy expression from the corner of his eye, but he did not pay much attention to it. He gently hugged Xiao Bao's shoulder and closed his eyes. During the day he was busy with work, and the little guy had to attend classes at the kindergarten. Therefore they did not have much time to spend together. Even though sometimes the little guy deliberately wanted to get close to him, he felt that when the little guy was awake he was too clingy. He could not wait to kick him as far away as possible. However, when he did not see him making a fuss, he missed him. It was really unbelievable. It seemed that he had not adapted well to the role of a father. When Gu Jinglian closed his eyes, Chu Ho, who was beside him, finally relaxed. It seemed that he just wanted to sleep with Xiao Bao. Chapter 34:13. The next day, when the morning sun shone in and shone on Xiao Bao's body, the little guy woke up and opened his sleepy eyes. His little hand that was clenched into a fist gently rubbed his sleepy eyes, but all of a sudden, he felt that the place he was lying on had become much more crowded. He turned his head in confusion and saw Chu Ho hugging him, sleeping soundly. He curiously turned his head again, only to see Gu Jinglian lying on his left, sleeping quietly. The little guy's mouth instantly formed an O shape and he sucked in a breath of cold air. When did this big guy lie down? Why didn't he feel anything at all? Where was his doll? Could it be that in the middle of the night, his doll had become his father? Xiao Bao's mind was in a mess, but he saw Gu Jinglian with one hand behind his head and the other holding him. His handsome and quiet sleeping face was so beautiful even when he was sleeping. Xiao Bao stared at him for a long time, and finally came back to his senses. He turned his head to look at Chu Ho and then looked at him. His heart was suddenly filled with satisfaction. He was a little happy in his heart, so happy that he didn't know what to do. For the first time in his life, he was lying on the same bed with his parents. Although he was sleeping in the middle and felt quite crowded, he still sincerely hoped that time would stop like this. So happy. It turned out that sleeping with his parents felt so safe. Although he woke up and was almost shocked, when he came back to his senses, Xiao Bao felt that he was so happy that he was about to fly to the clouds. Xiao Bao suddenly and carefully turned to face Gu Jinglian. He couldn't help but reach out his hand to trace his facial features. His handsome eyebrows were sword-like, his eyes were closed, his eyelashes were black, his nose was high, and his thin lips were gently pursed. His fingers gently traced his eyebrows. In his sleep, Gu Jinglian slightly frowned. He immediately carefully retracted his hand and immediately closed his eyes, pretending to be asleep. Hearing that there was no movement for a long time, Xiao Bao carefully opened the corners of his eyes again. Seeing that Gu Jinglian didn't seem to have any reaction and was still asleep, he was relieved. He lay flat again and looked down at his body. He saw Gu Jinglian's hand on his shoulder, and Chu Ho's hand around his waist. He didn't know why, but he had an idea. Thus, he carefully raised his hand and moved Gu Jinglian's heavy palm little by little towards Chu Ho's hand. He moved carefully, afraid that he would wake the two sleeping people. Gu Jinglian's palm was very big. Compared to his small hand, it could easily wrap around both of his hands. It was very difficult to move such a big hand. His movements were especially light. Gu Jinglian and Chu Ho were each more alert than the other. If he moved slightly more, it would be easy for them to wake up. When he got closer, he lifted Gu Jinglian's hand and gently placed his large palm on the back of Chu Ho's hand. In this way their hands overlapped. Xiao Bao was extremely happy. His little face was red as he covered his mouth and laughed secretly. Ah, if only Daddy and Mommy were really so loving. Even in his dreams he fantasized that Daddy and Mommy could truly love each other. In this way the three of them could be together forever. In this way he didn't have to worry about who to avoid. Although he now had Mommy and Daddy, the way they interacted with each other was very strange. Chapter 34:14. As Xiao Bao fantasized, he unknowingly felt a little sleepy. It was Saturday, so he didn't have to go to school. He closed his eyes and planned to have a good night's sleep. At 9 o'clock in the morning, Uncle Fu walked to Chu Ho's room and was about to wake them up when he opened the door. From afar he saw 3 people lying on the bed. His eyes widened in shock and he almost couldn't close his mouth. Master? When did he lie here? He remembered that when he went to the study last night, Gu Jinglian hadn't gone to bed yet. Why was he sleeping here? Uncle Fu's imagination ran wild. When he walked into the room, Chu Ho woke up with a start. She frowned. Before she opened her eyes, She felt another hand on the back of her hand. She glanced over from the corner of her eye and realized that Gu Jinglian's hand was on the back of her hand. She opened her mouth slightly in shock and couldn't come back to her senses. What was going on? Why did he put his hand on the back of her hand? The man opened his eyes. Before he came back to his senses, he vaguely sensed that something was wrong. There seemed to be something warm and soft wrapped in his palm. His gaze followed his hand and he saw that his hand was on the back of Chu-Ho's hand. For a moment he was a little dazed. When he came back to his senses he looked up. Their eyes met, but they quickly withdrew their hands. Gu Jinglian sat up on the bed immediately. He instinctively tugged at his tie, but his fingertips were clasping the lapels of his pajamas. He frowned and looked up. When he saw Uncle Fu standing at the bedroom door, he was stunned. What did he just see? What did he just see? He saw Master's hand on the back of Chu-Ho's hand. Could it be? He couldn't help himself. Last night. It was impossible. Xiao Bao, the third wheel, was lying in the middle. However, it was an indisputable fact that the two of them had slept on the same bed. Uncle Fu looked at Gu Jinglian meaningfully. He suddenly realized something. Recently, Master rarely got close to other women. Ever since Xiao Bao settled down in the Gu family, he seemed to be cut off from women. And after Chu-Ho moved into the Gu family, this situation worsened. Could it be that old master? Just as Uncle Fu was imagining the countless possibilities, Chu-Ho also sat up from the bed. His face was somewhat ashen as he stroked the back of his hand, seemingly very dissatisfied. She glanced at Gu Jinglian coldly. Her eyes seemed to say, "I didn't expect you to be such a lecherous man." Gu Jinglian's face darkened even more. He vented all his anger on Uncle Fu. "What are you standing there for?" Gu Jinglian said coldly. "Aren't you going to prepare breakfast?" Uncle Fu immediately nodded. Just as he turned around, he suddenly thought of something. He turned back and cleared his throat. Gu Jinglian stared at him. "What?" "Old master, breakfast is ready," Uncle Fu explained awkwardly. Gu Jinglian said coldly, "Have you done what I asked you to do?" "No." "Why aren't you going?" "Yes, yes." "Old master, please calm down." Uncle Fu hurriedly left. Old master's temper when he woke up was too terrifying. He couldn't bear it. Xiao Bao woke up. When he opened his eyes, he saw that Gu Jinglian and Chu-Ho were already awake and sitting by the bed. However, in such a large room, there was an inexplicable pressure that made one's heart palpitate. Chapter 34:15. Xiao Bao curled up. He felt that when he woke up, the atmosphere would be so tense. Gu Jinglian didn't look too good, and Chu-Ho didn't look too good either. What was going on? They were clearly fine just now. Why did everything change the moment he woke up? Chu-Ho sat on the edge of the bed. When she thought about how Gu Jinglian's hand was on the back of her hand when she woke up, she felt irritated. She instinctively reached out, pulled the blanket over, and wiped the back of her hand fiercely. Pervert! When Gu Jinglian heard this, his eyes couldn't help but darken a few degrees. Even though she didn't mention any names, it was obvious who she was referring to. Pervert. To hell with it. When he woke up and saw this scene, he was still baffled. Gu Jinglian was upset. He suddenly got up and left the room. Chu-Ho saw his sullen back and became even more annoyed. Why did he look so angry? She hadn't even said anything. Xiao Bao carefully glanced at Chu-Ho's expression and asked tentatively, "Mom, what's wrong? You seem to be very unhappy." Chu-Ho said gloomily, "It's nothing. I dreamed that I was bitten by a dog." Oh. Xiao Bao's lips twitched. However, he was still young and didn't know what Chu-Ho was insinuating. Xiao Bao got out of bed and changed his clothes. When he went downstairs, he saw Uncle Fu coming out of the dining room. He was about to call Gu Jinglian for dinner. Xiao Bao immediately went up to Uncle Fu and grabbed the corner of his shirt. He said uneasily, "Uncle Fu, Uncle Fu." Uncle Fu patiently squatted down in front of him and pinched his cheek. "What's wrong? Xiao Bao? Have you noticed?" Xiao Bao hugged his neck and whispered in his ear, "Uncle and Mommy are sleeping on the same bed today." Oh. Uncle Fu nodded. However, the two of them seemed to be very unhappy. Xiao Bao felt wronged. What happened? The two of them were fine yesterday. Uncle Fu was speechless for a moment. How could he tell Xiao Bao that the reason why Chu Ho and Gu Jinglian were fine yesterday was because they wanted to attend his parent-teacher conference? They were just putting on a show and pretending to be peaceful. But in reality, the two of them were like fire and water. When Xiao Bao saw that Uncle Fu did not speak, he became even more worried and said worriedly, "Mom seems to hate Uncle, and Uncle doesn't seem to like Mom either. What should we do?" "That's the truth," Uncle Fu said vaguely. "The two of them don't have a good relationship." Xiao Bao tilted his head curiously. "Then why do they hate each other when their relationship is so good and loving?" Uncle Fu choked for a moment and did not know how to answer this question. Xiao Bao continued to ask, "Since they hate each other, how did they give birth to me?" Uncle Fu did not know how to answer such a profound question. When Xiao Bao saw that Uncle Fu was not replying and looked like he was in a difficult situation, he suddenly thought of something. His face looked like a storm was coming. Xiao Bao is so pitiful. He pinched the corner of his shirt and looked pitiful. His little nose was wrinkled and he looked like he wanted to cry but had no tears. Uncle Fu immediately hugged him and coaxed him. "What's wrong?" Xiao Bao feels that Xiao Bao is an unwanted and unloved child. Chapter 34:16. When Uncle Fu heard this, he immediately replied, "How can Xiao Bao say that? Who said that no one wants Xiao Bao? Who said that no one loves Xiao Bao? Doesn't Uncle Fu dote on you?" Whoa! It would have been better if he hadn't said this. Once he did, Xiao Bao opened his mouth and howled. Uncle Fu was caught off guard and his eardrums almost exploded. Xiao Bao doesn't want Uncle Fu. Xiao Bao wants Papa, Xiao Bao wants Mama. Okay. Sure. Uncle Fu hugged him tightly and coaxed him. Don't cry. Xiao Bao, how can you think this way? Doesn't your Papa dote on you? Your Mama dotes on you too. But, Xiao Bao sobbed as if he had suffered a great grievance. He hugged Uncle Fu's neck, his eyes red and filled with tears. He looked very pitiful. But Papa doesn't like Mama, and Mama doesn't like Papa either. By then, Papa will definitely have another woman he likes, and Mama will definitely have another man she likes. By then, when Papa marries another woman, and Mama marries another man, Xiao Bao will have one more stepmother and one more stepfather. If Papa hates Xiao Bao, and Papa hates Xiao Bao and ostracizes Xiao Bao, Papa doesn't want Xiao Bao, and Mama doesn't want Xiao Bao either. Xiao Bao will completely become an unloved and unwanted child. Whoa! After throwing out a series of words, the little bean sat down on the ground and wailed loudly. His cries were earth-shattering, and even ghosts and gods would weep. Uncle Fu covered his face. He had to admit that the little boy understood this problem very well. When he thought about it, it made sense. On the other hand, he wasn't worried about Master. However, if Chu Ho really fell in love with another man, then Xiao Bao would have a stepfather. Indeed, not good. Xiao Bao's cries were earth-shattering. Uncle Fu spent a lot of effort to calm him down. When Chu Ho came downstairs for breakfast, he saw Uncle Fu hugging Xiao Bao and rocking him back and forth. It took a lot of effort to coax him. When Xiao Bao saw Chu Ho, he immediately thought of the grievances he had suffered, and tears filled his cheeks again. What happened? Chu Ho walked over and looked at him. Why is Xiao Bao crying? Uncle Fu sighed, but he had a headache. He concisely recounted what had just happened. When Chu Ho heard it, he could not help but break out in cold sweat. What stepmother and stepfather? How could this rascal think so far ahead? Chu Ho immediately hugged Xiao Bao and comforted him. Xiao Bao, why do you like to let your imagination run wild? Who said that Mommy doesn't want you anymore? Mommy wants me now, but it's hard to say in the future. Xiao Bao said angrily. Chu Ho did not know whether to laugh or cry. Has our Xiao Bao become a prophet? Does he know what will happen in the future? Is Mommy not going to get married for the rest of her life? Won't Mommy be too lonely by herself? This child really knew a lot. He wasn't like this in the past. What exactly did the kindergarten teacher teach him? She quickly coaxed. Who said that? Mommy won't get married for the rest of her life and will stay by Xiao Bao's side. Xiao Bao definitely won't have a stepfather. What about a stepmother? Xiao Bao stared at her pitifully. Daddy won't find a stepmother either? This Chu Ho was suddenly put in a spot. This was hard to say. Chapter 34:17. Xiao Bao cried even harder. Chu Ho hugged him and promised, "No matter what, Mama promises you that in this lifetime, Xiao Bao is the only baby. I will definitely not find a stepfather for Xiao Bao." Xiao Bao rubbed his eyes and looked at her suspiciously. "Really?" "Yes, really. It can't be any more real." Xiao Bao happily threw himself into her arms. Only then did this end. Uncle Fu brought breakfast into the room. Gu Jinglian sat in front of the study table. Unexpectedly, he wasn't playing with his pen and ink. Instead, he was resting his head with his hand on his hand. No one knew what he was thinking about. Uncle Fu placed the breakfast on the table and pretended to mention it casually. Just now Xiao Bao cried for a long time. It wasn't easy to calm him down. Upon hearing this, Gu Jinglian opened his eyes and asked in surprise, "Why is he crying again?" This guy seemed to be used to crying. Uncle Fu said in a roundabout way, "It's all because of Old Master." "About me?" Xiao Bao is worried that Old Master will find him a stepmother. Gu Jinglian's lips twitched violently and he was speechless. "Who said that I'm going to find him a stepmother?" Uncle Fu smiled. "Isn't it because the child is still young? It's inevitable that his imagination will run wild. The little guy is very sensitive. It's easy for his imagination to run wild. Tell him to relax." "It's impossible." Gu Jinglian casually picked up his cup and took a sip of the black tea. Uncle Fu probed again. Then, "Old Master, it's not that I want to say this, but it's still the same old saying. Now, in the entire Gu family, only Old Master's marriage matters are the most worrying. I've said it before. I'm not getting married." Gu Jinglian put down his cup and said coldly, "You don't have to worry about this." Uncle Fu sighed and said, "How can I not worry? Master, do you have a girl in mind?" "No," Gu Jinglian said without thinking. "Then how about Chu Ho?" Uncle Fu smiled. "What do you think of her?" "Nothing." Gu Jinglian gradually became impatient. "Are you here to talk nonsense with me?" Uncle Fu immediately looked down, shook his head and said, No, it's just a passing mention. Get out." Uncle Fu was kicked out of the house. However, not long after, Gu Jinglian heard footsteps coming from the door. Then the door was carefully pushed open, and a small head sneakily poked in. Gu Jinglian looked up, but from the corner of his eye, he caught a glimpse of a little girl sneaking into the room sneakily. What? Only when he spoke did Xiao Bao realize that his whereabouts had been discovered. He immediately straightened his body and smiled brightly. "Daddy." After yesterday's parent-teacher conference, he was almost used to saying this word. Gu Jinglian's ears were also pleased to hear this. However, he didn't have to think about it to know that the little guy's smile was so flattering that he must be up to no good. "I have something to report." Xiao Bao immediately walked to his side and lay on his lap. He asked curiously, "Daddy, do you think Mommy is pretty?" What kind of question was this? Gu Jinglian said coldly, "She's average." "Then do you think Mommy is good?" "Average." Xiao Bao was not satisfied and asked again, "Then how did Xiao Bao come about?" Gu Jinglian was also choked by him. This guy seemed to have the ability to make others speechless. This question was really too difficult to answer. Chapter 34:18. Gu Jinglian gave a catch-all answer. "You'll know when you grow up." Xiao Bao racked his brains but could not figure it out. "Don't always say that you'll wait for me to grow up. Because even when I grow up, I don't understand why you don't want my mother when she's so good." Gu Jinglian. "When I grow up, I don't know why you two gave birth to me even though you two clearly hate each other." Xiao Bao hugged his thigh in distress and said sadly, "Daddy, do you know? Xiao Bao thought that he didn't have a father when he was born. Other children have fathers but Xiao Bao doesn't." Xiao Bao saw other children being carried and lifted up by their fathers every day. Why didn't Xiao Bao have a father? Is it because Xiao Bao isn't good enough? Why doesn't Daddy want Xiao Bao? These words could be said to be extremely sad to hear. The little guy looked up and tilted his head. Suddenly he stammered, "Actually, do you know? I'm still quite grateful to that auntie. She kidnapped me and brought me to this city. Otherwise I wouldn't have met you, right?" The auntie he was referring to was naturally Song Enya. If it weren't for her, He might not have known that he actually had a father in this lifetime. This father could be quite fierce at times. He spoke with a cold face like an iceberg and would even glare at him fiercely. Therefore, although there was hatred toward Song Enya, there was also a little gratitude. Somehow he had found his father. However, looking at the seemingly irreconcilable cold relationship between Gu Jinglian and Chu Ho, he frowned for a moment. When he woke up in the morning, he overlapped Gu Jinglian's and Chu Ho's hands. Similarly, he harbored a beautiful wish. He did not intend to force them at all. It was just that he hoped that his father would truly be his father. He hoped that Gu Jinglian would not only treat him well, but also Chu Ho well. When Gu Jinglian heard this, his gaze could not help but become unfathomable. Back then, his relationship with Chu Ho was a complete accident, and Xiao Bao's birth was nothing more than an accident. There was no love, no crystallization of any emotions. The truth was straightforward and cruel, but it was the truth. Before this, the only reason he had allowed Chu Ho to stay in the Gu family was because of Xiao Bao. Xiao Bao relied on Chu Ho, and Gu Jinglian also cared about Xiao Bao's feelings, so he tacitly allowed Chu Ho to stay in the Gu family. However, it was also limited to this. He had never seriously thought about how to deal with the problem between him and Chu Ho. But now, Xiao Bao's uneasiness and hesitation made him reconsider this question. Gu Jinglian lowered his head and looked at Xiao Bao hugging his leg with a resentful look on his face. He couldn't help but say softly, "Don't worry, you won't have a stepmother." This was his promise, and also his guarantee to Xiao Bao. As long as he said something, he would not change it unless he was dead. When Xiao Bao heard this and received his guarantee, his heart was greatly comforted. "Okay. It's a promise." Xiao Bao stretched out his pinky and said, "Pinky, swear." Gu Jinglian was stunned, but he still stretched out his pinky and hooked it with his. Xiao Bao said sternly, "Pinky, swear. You're not allowed to lie to me for 100 years. With that said, he put a seal on Gu Jinglian's thumb with a serious expression. Only then was it complete. This little fellow seemed to be very easily satisfied. After he gave this promise, the little fellow was really satisfied and no longer pestered him to ask this and that. Chapter 34:19. On the weekend, when Gu Jinglian arrived at the company, there was already someone waiting in the reception room. His assistant reported, "Mr. Gu, they're here." Hearing this, he walked towards the reception room. As soon as he pushed the door open, the principal and the form teacher immediately stood up and smiled at him obsequiously. However, no matter how big their smiles were, they could not hide the fear in their eyes. Who was Gu Jinglian? What kind of existence was the Gu family in the capital? They were a super financial group that owned 4 major multinational corporations and were almost on par with the Mu Corporation in the past. Especially now, the Mu Corporation was no longer as glorious as before. The Shengyu Corporation was rising, but the Gu Corporation still occupied an important position. However, Gu Jinglian's identity was not that simple. Anyone who had lived in the capital for many years would definitely hear the name Gu Jinglian. His identity caused others to be wary of him. Therefore, when they saw Gu Jinglian walk in, the air in the huge reception room suddenly froze. Gu Jinglian turned back to his seat and glanced at them lightly. "Sit." Only then did the principal and form teacher dare to sit down. Seeing him was like seeing a saint. They were afraid of neglecting him. The form teacher sat uneasily, not knowing where to place her hands. Previously, at the parent-teacher conference, she did not know Gu Jinglian's background. However, after the parent-teacher conference, the principal hurriedly came to her and said that something had happened. She did not know what had happened. The principal asked her, "There's a child in your class called Gu Chengza. Do you know his background?" She was still at a loss. It was not until the principal told her about Gu Jinglian's identity that she felt a lingering fear. She carefully recalled if she had neglected this man at the parent-teacher conference. Only when she was sure that she had not neglected him did she feel relieved. The principal said that something had happened in the parking lot. When she asked what had happened, the principal said that Li Nuhan's father's car had been smashed. It was said that it was a Porsche that had been smashed into scrap metal and was completely destroyed. With the engine destroyed, the car was equivalent to a wreck. It had lost a few million yuan. "I rushed over just now. Nuhan's father said that Gu Cheng's parents sent someone to smash the car. I looked at the name list and found out that Gu Cheng's father is Gu Jinglian. Gu Jinglian. No wonder he had a displeased expression when he was asked to introduce himself, hiding his background. Why did you smash the car for no reason? Although Gu Jinglian had a powerful background, judging from the parent-teacher meeting, he was definitely not the type to flaunt his power. He kept a low profile and did not touch other people's cars for no reason. He only smashed Li Xianlai's car. Teacher Xue had a good impression of Gu Jinglian. He was a gentleman, polite, and a man of few words, but he gave off a noble and elegant vibe. She had exchanged a few words with him. Although he was a little cold, he was definitely not overly arrogant. If the principal hadn't revealed his identity, she really wouldn't have known that he had such a background. The principal said that Li Xianlai probably did not like Gu Jinglian and stole his limelight at the parent-teacher conference. Therefore, he surrounded Gu Jinglian in the parking lot and wanted to reason with him. In the end, Nuhan was insensible and snatched Xiao Bao's toy. Li Xianlai and Nuhan's mother did not stop her. Gu Jinglian was angry. Of course, the consequences of being angry were very serious. A 1,000,000 yuan Porsche was directly destroyed. It was tragic beyond compare. A car being destroyed was not scary, but what was scary was the aftermath. Chapter 34:20. The principal planned to talk to Li Xianlai on Monday. However, Li Xianlai brought Nuhan to the school on Saturday, saying that he wanted to transfer schools. Transfer schools. Li Xianlai did not mention the reason for the transfer. He only said vaguely, "There are some problems with the business, so we need to move out of town." The principal felt that this was not a simple matter, but Li Xianlai refused to say much. He only said that time was tight and that he needed to complete the procedures as soon as possible. It was not until the weekend that the principal found out that Li Xianlai was there because of Gu Jinglian that he decided to transfer the business to another city. With Li Xianlai's background, Gu Jinglian could crush him with his eyes closed. Li Xianlai knew that he was no match for this man. Therefore, he moved his family to another city. In the span of one night, they moved away. The principal was also trembling with fear. In the morning, he received a call saying that the CEO of the Gu family wanted to see them. He became more and more frightened, not knowing the reason for it. Gu Jinglian arrived an hour in advance. When Gu Jinglian walked in, the man's aura was so intimidating that the principal and Ms. Xue found it difficult to breathe. Teacher Xue glanced at the principal and saw that he was also sweating and uneasy. "What are you nervous about?" Gu Jinglian said expressionlessly. "I think you know who I am." "Yes, we." Before the principal could say anything, Gu Jinglian interrupted him. "I hope that your school will keep my identity a secret." "A secret?" He was a little surprised. Teacher Xue was also surprised. She thought that Gu Jinglian wanted them to take special care of Xiao Bao. "However, since my son is studying in your school, I hope that the incident on the day of the parent-teacher conference will not happen again." Gu Jinglian paused and said, "You should know that I don't have the patience to deal with these trivial matters." "Yes, yes." The principal was shocked and broke out in cold sweat. He quickly nodded. Gu Jinglian also gave some instructions. For example, Xiao Bao's physical fitness was not particularly good. He was a little naughty, so he must be disciplined when necessary. Another example was that Xiao Bao lacked a sense of security and had a stubborn personality. Hence, she hoped that the homeroom teacher would take care of him more. Mr. Xue naturally agreed. She especially liked Xiao Bao. Xiao Bao was well-behaved and obedient. Although he could be naughty sometimes, he was very respectful to his teachers. She could tell that although he had never been to kindergarten, he had been taught well since he was young. He was very polite and respectful to his elders. This was something that other children could not compare to. It was quite worry-free. To her surprise, Gu Jinglian did not have any particularly harsh requirements. He only gave them some instructions about Xiao Bao before letting them go back. So that was what he was talking about. When the director walked out of Gu's, he felt like he had just survived a disaster. He was so scared that his back turned cold. No matter what, it's better to let the parents know, in case something like this happens again. Mr. Xue also agreed. Therefore, they went back and called the parents of the other children in the class one by one to remind them about this matter. They simply hoped that their children would not bully little Treasure, lest they get into trouble. All the parents knew that Xiaobao came from a powerful family. Hence, when they went back home, they either threatened, exhorted, or threatened their children. Chapter 34:21. Monday. Xiaobao went to kindergarten as usual. However, when he skipped to class with his backpack, he felt that the atmosphere in the class was different. Many of the children were avoiding him. Xiaobao sat down on his seat and saw Shang'er turn her head. She looked a little scared as she called out his name tentatively. Xiaobao. Morning, Shang'er. Xiaobao smiled brightly and greeted her as usual. Seeing Xiaobao's gentle smile, Shang'er's heart warmed. Her doubts were dispelled and her face returned to its usual expression of closeness. Morning. Xiaobao looked around and saw that the other children were staring at him. However, when he followed their gazes, the children immediately turned their heads away in fear, not daring to look at him directly. Even the child who usually bullied him the fiercest was careful around him. So strange. Xiaobao muttered strangely. Everyone is so strange today. Why are they all looking at me secretly? Xiaobao. Shang'er looked around hesitantly. She suddenly stood up, took his hand and pulled him out of the classroom. The moment the two of them left, the classroom burst into an uproar. Wow! Shang'er is so bold. How would she dare? Shang'er is so amazing. Shang'er only let go of Xiaobao's hand when they were far away from the classroom. Shang'er, what's going on? Xiaobao scratched his head strangely. What can't be said in the classroom? Before Shang'er could say anything, Xiaobao's eyes lit up and he immediately said, I know. There must be some secret, right? As he said that, he smiled and moved closer to her ear. Shang'er must only want to tell Xiaobao, right? Shang'er was so angry that she didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She said, Xiaobao, don't you feel that something is wrong today? Now that she mentioned it, little Treasure also realized it. That's right, something's not right. What's wrong with them? They keep staring at me. I don't know either, but my mom told me to keep a distance from you and not play with you. Xiaobao heard that and his eyes widened in shock. Why? Because my mom said that your dad is super fierce. As she said that, the little girl revealed a fearful expression. Xiaobao heard that but he couldn't refute. A little. Shang'er heard that and her heart ached. Is your dad also very fierce to you? It's okay, it's just sometimes. Yeah, he's a little fierce. Little Treasure immediately added. But it's still all right. But how did her mother's mom knew that his dad was fierce? Little Treasure stroked his chin and was slightly puzzled. My mother also said that if we made you unhappy, our family would be in trouble. So, she told me to keep a distance from you. Shang'er said fearfully. Xiaobao, I really like to play with you but my mom won't let me. But I still want to play with you. If I don't do well, don't be angry, okay? She had a pitiful look on her face and was very careful. Xiaobao tugged at her little hand and pursed his lips. I also like to play with Shang'er. Shang'er, don't listen to your mom. My dad isn't that bad. I don't know either. I also think that your dad is quite good. He's handsome and good at games. Chapter 34:22. Did you know? Nuhan transferred schools. Shang'er said again. Xiaobao was a little surprised when he heard this. Although he hated Nuhan, the chubby boy's transfer was too sudden. He was still surprised. What's going on? I heard that he made your father angry, so he was forced to transfer schools. I heard this from my mother too. Xiaobao was suddenly in a daze. Recalling the incident in the parking lot, it was true that Nuhan's family was unreasonable, and even snatched his toy. He could tell that his father was very angry. However, he couldn't have transferred schools because of such a small matter, right? Xiaobao naturally did not know that Gu Jinglian had sent people to smash Nuhan's father's car into pieces. Hence, he felt that Nuhan's family was making a mountain out of a molehill. Shang'er was too lazy to think about it. She said to Xiaobao, Aya, I don't care anymore. No matter what, we'll always be good friends, right? Of course. Shang'er will always be my good friend. Xiaobao held her hand. The two little kids looked at each other and smiled. The two of them returned to the classroom hand in hand. However, they saw the other children looking at Shang'er and Xiaobao with awe and fear in their eyes. Why does Shang'er still dare to hold hands with Xiaobao? Shang'er is so pitiful. Don't tell me she likes Xiaobao? It can't be. When Xiaobao returned to his seat, he felt countless pairs of eyes staring at him from behind. It was like being pricked by needles. This feeling was very strange. It was as if he had suddenly become an outcast and was being ostracized. Xiaobao turned around feeling wronged. However, he saw the children immediately shrink their shoulders, looking very afraid of him. Was there a need to be like this? During lunch, Xiaobao sat in his seat. Other than Shang'er, the other children stayed far away from him. During the afternoon nap, Teacher Shui moved the child sleeping with him to another bed. Xiaobao did not sleep for the entire afternoon. He sat up and looked at the other beds. The other children were sleeping together. Only he seemed to be left out by the world. How could this be? How did he become an outcast for no reason? Why were so many children distancing themselves from him for no reason? He did not do anything wrong, and did he bully anyone? Why were the children ostracizing him? During the afternoon activity class, Xiaobao stood alone in the gym. He looked at the other children who were playing in full swing. He felt so wrong that he wanted to cry. Shang'er was about to walk over when a child pulled her back. Shang'er, don't play with Gu Chengza anymore. Why? Because if you make Xiao unhappy, his father's if he's angry, who knows? The children whispered in her ear. Shang'er's expression became much more complicated. She was still hesitating when the other children pulled her away. She looked back at Xiaobao 3 times with every step, reluctant to leave. Shang'er. Seeing that Shang'er did not want to play with him, Xiaobao's eyes turned red, but he forced himself not to cry. After school that night, Chu Ho came to pick him up. However, he saw him sitting in the classroom motionless and unhappy. All the children were packing their bags nimbly. Only he was staring blankly at the empty table, his face full of worry. Chapter 34-23. Xiaobao sat alone in his seat, looking gloomy as though he had been alienated by the other children. Chu Ho was stunned. She walked to his side and helped him pack his bag. However, she saw Xiaobao looking up at her, looking aggrieved. "Mom!" Halfway through his sentence, his face darkened and he looked like he was about to cry. Chu Ho saw this and immediately squatted down. She hugged him and asked curiously, "What's wrong? Who bullied you?" "No one bullied me." Xiaobao pursed his lips and said, "I'd rather someone bullied me." It was precisely because no one bullied him that he felt disappointed. It wasn't that he needed to be abused, but the feeling of being alienated was too lonely. "Mom, what did I do wrong? Why do all the children avoid me when they see me?" Chu Ho was also confused. That day, at the parent-teacher conference, she saw many children surrounding him. Xiaobao was long and Xiaobao was short. He was very popular. How did everything change after just one weekend? Xiaobao poked his finger and said, "Did Xiaobao do something wrong? How could that be?" Chu Ho picked him up and comforted him gently. Xiaobao is so obedient and not naughty. How could he not like Xiaobao? Xiaobao leaned on her shoulder sadly. He pursed his lips but didn't say anything. Chu Ho sighed helplessly. She carried him with one hand and carried her bag with the other. When she walked out of the classroom, a group of parents stared at her in shock. Wasn't she too awesome? She carried the child with one hand and carried her bag with the other. She didn't look like she was struggling at all. It was as though she was carrying a ball of cotton. How could this woman be so strong? How could they have known that Chu Ho was an Interpol officer? She used to be a mercenary and had undergone high-intensity physical training. Don't look at how skinny she is. If you roll up your sleeves, you can see that her muscles are well developed. They are not overly muscular, but there is no excess fat. They are all fine muscles. Carrying Xiaobao with one hand was a piece of cake. When they returned to the Gu residence, Xiaobao locked himself in the room. He stayed in the room alone and played with building blocks unhappily. These were building blocks that Uncle Fu had bought for him. When Uncle Fu saw that Xiaobao seemed to be unhappy after coming back, he couldn't help but feel strange. He asked Chu Ho, "What's wrong with Xiaobao? I saw that the little guy was still in high spirits when he went to school." "I don't know what happened either. Could it be that he was bullied by other children? How could this be?" Chu Ho said, "I think a lot of children are alienated from him." "Alienate?" "Yes." Uncle Fu also started to worry. He had thought that this matter would pass quickly. He didn't expect the situation to worsen. It was fine on the first day, but on the second day, the children in the class didn't even look at him. Other than the homeroom teacher and the lifestyle teacher, the other children didn't dare to talk to him. Other than Shonger, who was still the same as usual. But sometimes the other children would run up to Shonger and secretly say bad things about him. Don't talk to Xiao Bao. For a moment Xiao Bao was like a ghost in the class. He couldn't be mentioned at all. Xiao Bao suddenly felt depressed. How could it be like this? Was he some kind of plague? They were avoiding him as if he was something. How infuriating. Chapter 34-24. That day, Uncle Fu went to wake Xiao Bao up as usual. However, Xiao Bao refused to get out of bed no matter what. He curled up in his bed and refused to go to school. No matter how Uncle Fu coaxed him, he refused to move. In the end he said, "Xiao Bao doesn't want to study anymore." When he said this, Uncle Fu realized the seriousness of the matter. It seemed that this little guy had met with some trouble in school. However, no matter how much Uncle Fu asked, Xiao Bao remained wrapped in his blanket. His small body curled up in his bed and he refused to talk to him. He only said, "The other children don't like me anyway. It doesn't matter if I go or not. So I'm not going." When Uncle Fu heard this, he couldn't help but think of Gu Jinglian's childhood. At that time, when Gu Jinglian was in kindergarten, he had initially studied in a private international school. That school was of a higher class than the one Xiao Bao was studying in now. It was an international school. Hence, the children who attended the school were from other countries. Many of them were foreign workers, high-ranking officials in embassies, and senior management of multinational corporations. However, Gu Jinglian was the only one who had a special background. At that time, although the Gu family wasn't as powerful as it was now, they were still powerful enough to be on par with the Mu Corporation. In the beginning, when Gu Jinglian entered the school, the Gu family didn't emphasize his identity too much. However, Uncle Fu had forgotten the exact reason. It seemed that in the kindergarten, a child had provoked Gu Jinglian. In the end, the two children couldn't accept each other's words and started fighting. At that time, Gu Jinglian was only 5 years old. However, he inherited the blood of the Gu family. He didn't talk much, but he didn't have a temper. Once he got angry, he would fight if he could. From the time Gu Jinglian could remember, he didn't talk much. He was taciturn and had a cold temperament. In kindergarten, she wasn't very popular either. Rather than saying that he was unsociable, it was more accurate to say that Gu Jinglian had matured early since he was a child. After all, he grew up in such a family environment. What he saw from a young age was unimaginable to other children. Violence and fighting. When he was very young, he even followed his father to patrol the casinos. Many times he watched as the gamblers, whether they were in debt or cheating, were beaten by a group of people until they wished they were dead. In such an environment, he matured earlier than the other children. In comparison, other children at this age were innocent and naive. As a result, there was a very deep generation gap. Gu Jinglian, on the other hand, disdained to interact with those children. The arrogance in his bones made him isolate himself. However, after entering kindergarten for a period of time, his cold personality had slightly improved. However, during that fight he was careless and didn't know how to control the strength in his hands. As a result, the child was covered in cuts and bruises. 5-year-old children had always been good at imitating. Whatever the adults did, the child would watch from the side and imitate them. Usually when children fought, they would either grab the child's clothes or give him a soft punch. However, Gu Jinglian pushed the child to the ground, picked up a small stool, and smashed it directly on him. His violent personality scared all the children in the class. However, Gu Jinglian didn't know that fighting like this was wrong. Chapter 34-25. What right did he have to give in to a weakling? When he fought, he also used all his strength, but Gu Jinglian was even more ruthless. Ever since that incident, little Jinglian was immediately quarantined by the children in class and became a dangerous person in everyone's eyes. From that day onwards, his character returned to his former cold, arrogant, and taciturn personality. No one could fit into his world anymore. When he reached primary school, Gu Jinglian no longer went to school. Instead, he hired a private tutor and studied at the Gu residence. At that time, the Gu family even specially built a private school. Uncle Fu did not expect that Xiao Bao would repeat the same mistake. This was not what he wanted to see. He only hoped that Xiao Bao could grow up safely and healthily like a child from an ordinary family. Seeing that Xiao Bao was really unwilling to go to school, Uncle Fu did not force him. Chu Ho stayed at the Gu residence to accompany Xiao Bao, while Uncle Fu rushed to the casino. Master Gu. Master Gu. Spare me. I won't do it again. A man's wailing and howling could be heard from the side room of the casino. Gu Jinglian sat calmly on the sofa, holding the teacup lid and gently taking a sip. Beside him, a few thugs picked up iron rods and smashed this person. Didn't I warn you and give you 5 days to return the money? Do you really think we're a charity organization? Not only are you not returning the money, you're even running away. Where do you think you're running to? The gambler hugged his head and curled up into a ball on the ground, trembling. He was beaten black and blue and had several broken bones all over his body. Masters, spare me. Spare me. I won't dare to do it again. I won't dare to run away again. I won't run away again. This gambler owed the casino a few million yuan and had been in debt for 2 years. With the interest compounding, the principal and interest amounted to tens of millions of yuan. Gu Jinglian said that he did not want him to return the principal and interest. At least, he would be forgiven if he returned the principal and added 1 million yuan in interest. This was already considered extremely benevolent. In the end, after giving an ultimatum, this guy actually wanted to run away. However, the capital was so big, and the Gu family's influence spread throughout the capital. Every little movement was under their control. Where could he run to? It didn't take much effort to capture him. Naturally, he had to teach him a lesson. The casino had 2 major sources of income. One was the probability advantage of the game. Don't talk about winning and losing, and don't brag about your amazing gambling skills. Gambling skills were a part of it, but it wasn't invincible. Regardless of the rules of the game, the banker's win rate was always above 60%. Other than that, the other part was through the use of high interest rates to become an objective source of profit. Usually, gamblers would want to make more money after winning money at the gambling table. Some games had a high threshold, so borrowing money was a natural thing to do. And those who lost money would naturally be unwilling to accept it. Therefore, they would also want to borrow money to win back the money they lost. They could not rule out the possibility that they were really lucky and won the money back. However, the money they won might not even be enough to pay the interest. If the winner continued to gamble, it was very likely that he would lose everything in an instant and fail at the last hurdle. In other words, very little of the casino's money flowed out. It would always be a cycle. However, some people just could not see through it. There were many people who lost their family fortune overnight. Very few people could leave the casino triumphantly. Chapter 34-26. When Uncle Fu pushed the door open and entered, the man was already on his last breath and was being dragged out. When Gu Jinglian saw him, he raised his eyebrows and asked, "Why are you here?" "Old master, something has happened," Uncle Fu said vaguely. "What's the matter?" He walked over to Gu Jinglian's ear and whispered a few words. When Gu Jinglian returned to the Gu residence, he went upstairs and hurriedly pushed open the bedroom door. He saw Chu Ho sitting by the window with a helpless look on his face. On the bed, the blanket was bulging. Xiao Bao was curled up under the blanket, motionless. "This guy." Gu Jinglian walked over and sat down on the side of the bed. He patted the bed gently with his large palm. The blanket was open slightly. A pair of red eyes looked out through the opening. When he saw that it was Gu Jinglian, his eyes reddened even more. His eyes were filled with tears and he looked extremely aggrieved. Gu Jinglian glanced at him and his tone became gentler. "What's the matter? Why won't he go to school?" Xiao Bao sullenly shrunk back under the blanket. Even his eyes were not exposed. Gu Jinglian seemed to be deep in thought. He looked at Chu Ho, as if asking him what had happened with his eyes. Chu Ho said frankly, "He won't say anything. He's been like this since a few days ago. He said that he's been neglected and alienated by the other kids." Neglected? Gu Jinglian frowned. He could not figure out the reason. At this moment, Xiao Bao's choked voice came from under the blanket. "The other kids don't like me. They don't want to play with me. They're afraid of me, they hate me, they say bad things about me. Gu Jinglian lifted the blanket and saw Xiao Bao curled up on the bed with his arms wrapped around his knees. His face was wet with tears and his eyelashes were clumped together because of his tears. His little mouth was puckered and he looked extremely aggrieved. He stubbornly wiped away his tears, but new tears flowed out. Gu Jinglian could not help but feel sorry for her. He spread out his body and patted his thigh lightly. Come here. When Xiao Bao heard this, he was initially unmoved. However, after hesitating for a while, he finally crawled to his side on all fours. Gu Jinglian said, "Daddy, carry me." For some reason, because of these 3 words, Xiao Bao's nose became even more sour. Grievances welled up in his heart and he burst into tears. He crawled into Gu Jinglian's arms and wrapped his 2 small hands tightly around his neck. His hands were wet. What was that? Gu Jinglian frowned. He had a perverted obsession with cleanliness. His hands were sticky and he could tell from the touch. His hands were wet with tears. Then she heard him sniff hard. Gu Jinglian's frown deepened. Not just tears. And his snot. The alarm bells in Gu Jinglian's head rang loudly. When Chu Ho saw this, he almost could not help but break down. One had to know that Gu Jinglian's obsession with cleanliness was quite perverted. In the past, there was a subordinate who touched his table without washing his hands. Gu Jinglian flew into a rage on the spot and sent people to disinfect the entire room 3 times. That subordinate was so scared that he was trembling in fear, afraid that he would lose his hands. Not to mention Xiao Bao's hands that were stained with tears and snot. Chu Ho was worried that Gu Jinglian would suddenly fly into a rage. However, the man endured it desperately and kept taking deep breaths. Xiao Bao did not see Gu Jinglian's completely ashen face. He hugged the back of his neck tightly and whimpered bitterly. I don't want to be hated, sob sob sob. Chapter 34:27. Now that Gu Jinglian was here, Xiao Bao was finally willing to speak. He sobbed as he recounted what had happened. It turned out that all the children in the class thought that he was the one who had caused Nuahan to transfer schools. It was not that the children liked Nuahan, but because of what had happened to Nuahan, they were afraid of Xiao Bao. They might not have seen how Nuahan had ostracized Xiao Bao. They only thought that if they played with Xiao Bao and angered him, then one of them would be the next to transfer schools. For a moment, Gu Cheng's name seemed to be regarded as a devil. All the children began to fear him from the bottom of their hearts. Xiao Bao felt extremely wronged. He felt that he had been isolated for no reason. Gu Jinglian's face darkened when he heard this. Uncle Fu had said that something had happened to Xiao Bao. He had thought that it was something important and had taken time out of his busy schedule to come back. In the end, it was because of this. Gu Jinglian pushed his face away in disdain. His voice was extremely cold. If you don't want to go to school, it's the same at home. Xiao Bao widened his eyes in shock and looked at him with tears in his eyes. What? Gu Jinglian had always had a limit to his patience. He did not like to repeat what he had said a second time. If you don't want to go to school, it's the same at home. He repeated it patiently. Xiao Bao had originally thought that Gu Jinglian would comfort him, or hold him in his arms and coax him. He did not expect that Gu Jinglian would actually say that if he did not want to go, then he should not go. Such unexpected words made Xiao Bao dumbfounded. What's wrong? Gu Jinglian raised his eyebrows. You don't want to go? It's the same at home. Even if he did not study or go to school for the rest of his life, Gu Jinglian would still hire the best tutor for him. A diploma was important, but in Gu Jinglian's eyes, it was not worth mentioning. For him, some things that were too formal could be settled with money and power. In other words, Xiao Bao could stay in the Gu family and hire a tutor to teach him culture. When he became an adult, he could buy an honorary certificate from a famous university. There was no difference. Tomorrow, I'll get Uncle Fu to find a teacher for you. Just stay at home. No. After hearing what he said, Xiao Bao felt indignant. He muttered, I want to go to school. Then why didn't you go to school today? Gu Jinglian asked. Xiao Bao was speechless for a moment. Gu Jinglian said, there should be a limit to how willful you can be. If you want to go, then go. If you don't want to go, then don't go. He had to be responsible for his own decisions. You still want others to be responsible for you? Xiao Bao. He felt so wronged after being reprimanded. However, he did not dare to defy Gu Jinglian's authority. In Xiao Bao's eyes, Gu Jinglian's words were very authoritative. His words were almost like an iron law. Perhaps this was the difference between a father and a mother. The image of a father in a child's heart was great and intimidating. Some things that worked for Chu Ho might not work for Gu Jinglian. How could he not see Xiao Bao's intentions? He had been wronged in school and came home to vent his grievances. Then, through him, the matter would be resolved perfectly. However, he did not want Xiao Bao to rely on him too much. Chapter 34:28. Don't. Xiao Bao was so nervous that he started to cry again. I don't want to drop out of school. I'll go back to school tomorrow. Good boy. Gu Jinglian patted his head. At the side, Chu Ho and Uncle Fu were dumbfounded. No matter how they tried to coax him, Xiao Bao refused to come out of the blanket. However, Gu Jinglian settled the matter with just a few words. Xiao Bao looked at Gu Jinglian pitifully. His pitiful eyes were like those of a helpless puppy. He said softly, "But what if the children don't like me? Why don't they like you?" Because, Xiao Bao sniffled and said, "Because they think I'm not easy to get along with." Gu Jinglian asked, "Then do you think I'm easy to get along with?" "Of course." Xiao Bao said seriously. Xiao Bao is so cute and obedient. Teacher Shui said that Xiao Bao is very likable. Gu Jinglian said, "Then let them know that you're a child worth getting along with." Xiao Bao was enlightened when he heard this. He suddenly realized that he might be able to change the other children's prejudice against him through his own efforts. Gu Jinglian's words seemed to have enlightened him all of a sudden. At this thought, Xiao Bao nodded and said, "Yes, Xiao Bao understands now." Gu Jinglian stood up and turned around. However, he saw Uncle Fu staring at him as if he was worshipping a god. "Master, I didn't expect you to have such a method to deal with children. Was this considered a form of loosening the reins only to grasp them better?" Gu Jinglian adjusted his sleeves casually. His gaze was very cold. "Children are delicate. There's no need to spoil them." Uncle Fu was speechless. Chu Ho's lips twitched. Although Gu Jinglian's way of educating his child seemed unreasonable, she knew that sometimes, Xiao Bao really needed such a method. The child was too delicate, and in Xiao Bao's eyes, Chu Ho did not seem to have much of a deterrent force. Hence, the child could act coquettishly however he wanted because baby Chu felt that he would definitely indulge him. However, Gu Jinglian was different. What he said just now was not wrong. If he wanted to go, he would go. If he didn't want to go, he wouldn't go. Learning to deal with one's own problems was a form of growth. He was his father, but he would not spoil him blindly. This was his principle. She didn't expect him to have such a good view of educating children. He did not indulge Xiao Bao unconditionally just because he was his son. After settling Xiao Bao's matter, Gu Jinglian returned to the office. He had been busy recently and sometimes he even came home very late. After Gu Jinglian left, Xiao Bao also got out of bed and played with his toys in the room. Chu Ho looked for Uncle Fu because she had something to discuss with him. "I submitted a resume a while ago, and now the company's HR department has asked me to go to work." Uncle Fu was a little surprised when he heard this. "You found a job?" "Yes, I've recovered a little. It's time to find a job." She had to thank Uncle Fu for getting her various identification documents ready. She thought that she couldn't stay in the Gu family forever and do nothing. She couldn't stay idle, and she didn't like to live a life of being taken care of. Uncle Fu hesitated for a moment and asked casually, "What job?" "Anti-mafia police." What the hell? Uncle Fu was confused. There was no need to elaborate on Gu Jinglian's identity. Chapter 34:29. One black and one white, the other black and white, the other black and white. It was simply wonderful. Chu Ho saw that Uncle Fu's expression was a little strange and couldn't help but ask, "Is there a problem? Are you sure you want to do this job?" Uncle Fu said vaguely, "Old master will be very angry if he finds out." "What right does he have to be angry?" Chu Ho said unhappily. "Do I need to ask for his opinion on what kind of job I want?" Cough, cough, cough. Uncle Fu cleared his throat and said, "Xiao Bao must be the most special child." "Why do you say that?" "Dad is black and mom is black and white." This. Uncle Fu looked a little embarrassed. Chu Ho was speechless. At night, Gu Jinglian returned to the Gu residence from the company. He had just gone upstairs when Uncle Fu saw that he was back and immediately went up to him. "Old master." He saw that Uncle Fu looked hesitant and didn't know what was going on. He raised his eyebrows and thought that something had happened to Xiao Bao again. "What is it?" "It's like this." Uncle Fu cleared his throat and wanted to talk to him about this matter. "Chu Ho has found a job." Gu Jinglian was slightly stunned when he heard this. Why is she looking for a job? She said that she wants to rely on herself to support herself. Uncle Fu said truthfully. During this period, Chu Ho had been idle at home because of her health and did not have any source of income. All her expenses were paid by the Gu family. Sometimes Chu Ho would pick Xiao Bao up from school and Xiao Bao would ask her to buy him any toys that he wanted. However, she didn't have any money on her. Many times she had to bite the bullet and ask Uncle Fu to buy the toys for her. Then Uncle Fu would buy the toys for her. It wasn't that Uncle Fu didn't want to give her money, but she felt that it was too embarrassing to take someone else's money. Chu Ho had a strong personality and never liked to live under someone else's roof. Therefore, after her health improved a little, she submitted a few resumes. In fact, the police station did not have an anti-gang position, but most police stations would have an anti-gang department. Thus, the anti-mafia police department was created. However, the organization of the anti-mafia department was different from that of the ordinary police. This department had even stricter requirements for the police. Other than skills and mobility, all other qualities had to be taken into consideration. However, the salary was not much higher, but it was a very dangerous job. Walking in the rain of bullets, it was rare to get injured, but it was common to lose one's life. Therefore, most of the people who were recruited for this profession were retired soldiers or those who were transferred from the special forces. Therefore, this position was not very glamorous, and it was very difficult to recruit anyone. After all, the mindset of young people nowadays was different from before. Their lives were above everything else. As an outstanding police officer of the Interpol, Chu Ho was naturally qualified for this job. Gu Jinglian seemed indifferent and asked casually, "What kind of work?" Uncle Fu said cautiously, "Police." Gu Jinglian was stunned. He turned around and looked at him in surprise. "Police?" "Yes. I heard that it's the anti-mafia police." Gu Jinglian was speechless. How dare she? Who does she want to go against? Uncle Fu was speechless. Gu Jinglian said unhappily, "Why did she want to do this job for no reason?" "Because there's no income." Chapter 34:30. Previously, when Chu Ho was still recuperating, Uncle Fu had asked Gu Jinglian for advice. After careful consideration, he decided to let Chu Ho stay for Xiao Bao's sake. Moreover, he instructed Uncle Fu to transfer $3 million to her account every month. This was a considerable sum of money. After all, if she stayed in the Gu family, she would not need to spend money in most cases. $3 million was just her daily expenses. "I did, but she didn't want it." Uncle Fu felt wronged and immediately tried to defend himself. "She didn't want it? Why not?" "Because," Uncle Fu explained, "she said that you have a soft mouth when you've received gifts." Uncle Fu continued, "I can see that this girl is quite headstrong. Basically, she doesn't want to accept any favors from others. I didn't expect that she couldn't wait to look for a job as soon as she recovered." Gu Jinglian frowned tiredly and said plainly, "She can look for any job she wants. In the future, there's no need to specially report to me about this kind of thing." He turned around and went into his room, closing the door behind him. What a strange woman. Uncle Fu stood outside the door in a daze. It took him a while to come back to his senses and leave. The next morning, Xiao Bao really got out of bed very early. Yesterday, Gu Jinglian's words to him were really effective. Hence, when Chu Ho came to the room, he was already dressed and packed his school bag. He looked ready to go. Chu Ho sent Xiao Bao to school and reported to the police station. When they heard that there was a new trainee police officer who was directly employed in the anti-mafia department, many of the police officers in the police station were very curious. When Chu Ho appeared in the meeting room, everyone saw that she was actually a young woman. For a moment they were stunned. Chu Ho stood in front of the podium with her hands behind her back. Her posture was straight and her expression was serious. However, Her delicate and pretty face made it difficult for people to associate her with a well-trained anti-mafia police officer. In the anti-mafia department there were very few female members. This position was extremely dangerous. Whenever he went in and out of certain places, it was inevitable that he would encounter unexpected situations. The reason why there was a vacancy in this position, and the need for new blood, was because 3 police officers were injured during a special mission. They had no choice but to transfer to the administrative department. Hence there was a vacancy. Usually, this position had strict requirements and was strenuous and unrewarding. Hence, even retired soldiers who were not specially recruited were not willing to join. However, the sudden appearance of a woman in the morning meeting surprised everyone. Some of the police officers laughed contemptuously and secretly cursed. Could it be that they really couldn't find anyone? They actually recruited a little girl. Boss, why did you recruit a girl into the department? Some of the police officers questioned him. His words seemed to resonate with them. That's right. Is our team really unable to recruit any more people? They recruited a girl. I think it's strange too. This little girl has thin arms and legs. She doesn't have any skills, yet they still recruited her to drag us down? Everyone's doubts were not without reason. After all, women were at a disadvantage compared to men. Prejudice, of course, was unavoidable. Chapter 34-31. We still don't know who will be the one dragging us down. The moment she said that, a few of the burly police officers were indignant. Damn it, they were being teased by a newbie. And it was a woman. Looking at Chu-Ho's arrogant expression and her eyes full of sarcasm, it was obvious that she looked down on these senior police officers. One of the police officers slammed the table and stood up. Many of the people present were veterans, so they were all hot-blooded men. When they heard this, they could not sit still. The counselor at the podium saw this and scolded. Sit down. Captain. I told you to sit down. Did you hear me? You don't even want to obey my orders? The anti-gang team was all about obedience. Usually they could laugh and joke around, but when the captain gave an order, no one dared to disobey. The man snorted coldly and sat down. The counselor said, Let me introduce you. This is the new trainee police officer of the anti-gang team. Her name is Chu-Ho. In the future, we will be comrades in our team. Please take care of us. Chu-Ho walked to the podium and stood in a standard posture. She introduced herself. My name is Chu-Ho. Please take care of me. After that, she bent over and gave a standard bow to show her respect as a new police officer to her senior. After the morning assembly, Chu-Ho needed to register. Following that, there would be a week-long induction training and a 1-month internship. After a month, there would be a strict assessment. If she passed the assessment, she would be officially part of the force. When Chu-Ho walked out of the door, a few of the police officers looked at each other and exchanged glances. One of the men walked towards her and reached out to grab her shoulder. Chu-Ho grabbed his arm without looking back. Then, almost like a sudden clap of thunder, she threw him into the backpack. There was a loud bang. The man was thrown to the ground heavily, and he arched his body in pain. The cold marble floor was cold and hard. Chu-Ho turned around expressionlessly and sneered. If you wanted to test the skills of a newbie, you wouldn't have to resort to such a despicable method like a sneak attack. You? The man turned pale with fright as he stared at her in a daze. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't figure out how Chu-Ho's seemingly delicate body contained so much energy. It was too terrifying. Chu-Ho clapped his hands lightly and said, Unfortunately, I have to attend the training soon. Otherwise, I would be able to spar with Senior. Behind him, several police officers rushed out of the meeting room and stared blankly at the scene, feeling incredulous. Brother, why are you flirting? Shameful. The man got up from the ground and clenched his fists. Just as he was about to walk toward Chu-Ho, the shorter police officer behind him immediately pulled him back. All right, don't be impulsive. Don't make things difficult for a newcomer. That's right, Brother Hui. Don't let your emotions affect your decisions. If the counselor finds out, you'll definitely be punished. Only then did the man restrain his anger, turn around and leave. Chu-Ho thought to himself, You're crazy. The entire day was filled with training. However, what surprised the instructor was that Chu-Ho's aptitude was quite outstanding. Chu Ho could complete some of the more difficult training tasks with extremely high standards. When the training ended, the instructor called Chu Ho to the side and asked carefully, "Have you been a soldier before?" Chu Ho raised his eyebrows and said indifferently, "Yes." "Oh, retired veteran? Mercenary." "Oh." The instructor's mouth was wide open. Chapter 34-32. Chu Ho used to be from a mercenary group and was a top mercenary. After that, he officially joined the Interpol and worked at the headquarters. The instructor asked again, "Did you really work as a mercenary?" "Not really." "Oh? Then," Chu Ho said, "I used to be a police officer." "What police officer?" Chu Ho said seriously, "I'm the top anti-corruption inspector at the Interpol headquarters." "Oh." The instructor was at a loss for words. Interpol. That was an international police organization. They were the elites of the elites. They were all top international police officers. In other words, an anti-corruption inspector was a very high position. If he was really an anti-corruption inspector, he would receive a very high standard of reception when he went to other countries. "This? Are you kidding?" The man looked incredulous. Chu Ho said coldly, "Instructor, do I look like I'm joking?" The instructor was speechless. He didn't look like it. But according to his understanding, the international anti-corruption inspector changed every 5 years. The last one was indeed a female member. Moreover, this female member was the first in the history of anti-corruption inspectors to be a female. Could it be? It was her. Then what was the point of teaching? She should be the one teaching him. If someone else said this, he might have doubted it. However, Chu Ho was so outstanding that he announced his graduation in one day. Because she didn't need to receive any training at all. As soon as Chu Ho left the police station, the instructor ran to the counselor to ask where Chu Ho came from. The political and law exam. The application form was submitted directly from the entrance of the official website. Then, she took the political and law exam and was directly admitted. "What's wrong, Instructor Zhang? Is there a problem with her? You let her take part in the induction training." She should be the one to train us." Chu Ho arrived at the kindergarten on time. At the door of the classroom, he saw Xiao Bao packing his bag. Shang'er saw Chu Ho outside the window and exclaimed, "Xiao Bao, your mother is here to pick you up." Xiao Bao raised his head. His gloomy face finally regained some color. He carried his backpack and walked out of the classroom. He threw himself into Chu Ho's arms, looking a little aggrieved. "Mom, the kids are still ignoring me." On the way back, Xiao Bao was still unhappy. When Chu Ho asked him again, Xiao Bao finally said, "I tried to talk to them, but they kept away from me. As if I was a big monster." He did as Gu Jinglian said and tried his best to be responsible for his own affairs. However, the child was still unwilling to talk to him. He was vexed. Chu Ho picked him up and kissed his rosy cheeks tenderly. "Don't rush. Take your time." Chu Ho suddenly asked, "Your birthday is coming up. Have you thought about what kind of birthday party you're going to hold?" Xiao Bao poked his finger and said, "I want to spend it with Shang." Chu Ho remembered. "Ah, the little girl sitting in front of you?" "Yeah. Do you like her?" Xiao Bao blushed and immediately said, "No? Look at you. Your face is red. You still say you don't like her?" Chapter 34-33. Sure. Xiao Bao was excited. However, he suddenly thought of something and hesitated. What if they don't want to come? Why would they? Chu Ho smiled. If it's a sincere invitation, why wouldn't they want to come? "Xiao Bao, don't you know how to draw? You can make an invitation letter for each of the children and invite them to your birthday party." Xiao Bao nodded heavily. Chu Ho brought Xiao Bao around the stationery store and bought watercolor pens, colored pencils, and cardboard cards. When they got home and had dinner, Xiao Bao and Chu Ho started the huge project. "Let's make one for Shang'er first." With that thought in mind, Xiao Bao began to move. However, how should he make the invitation card? Xiao Bao was in a dilemma. Chu Ho asked him, "Aren't you good at drawing? Draw Shang'er, then draw you and write some words." "That's it." Xiao Bao was inspired. Hence, he held the pencil and started to draw stroke by stroke. When Uncle Fu walked in, Xiao Bao had already finished drawing Shang. He had a strong talent for drawing. Although the Shang'er he drew was not as realistic as the sketch, the cartoon version of Shang, had a pair of big watery eyes, a small nose and cherry lips. She was wearing a beautiful dress and standing in front of a beautiful castle. Xiaobao added himself. The two of them were holding hands and flowers were blooming in front of them. It was a childish romance. Chuho thought to himself, when this kid grows up, he'll definitely be good at getting girls to like him. I'm done. Xiaobao showed the completed invitation card to Chuho and Uncle Fu. The latter was stunned. Xiaobao's drawing is so good? Yeah. Did he learn how to draw before? Chuho shook his head. No, he seems to have been born with a natural talent for drawing. Uncle Fu smiled. Then she must have inherited old master's talent in painting. When Chuho heard this, he was stunned. Is Gu Jinglian very good at painting? Old master is good at painting. When he was young, his landscape painting was exhibited in an art gallery. It was bought at a high price of 100,000 yuan. Xiaobao was astonished. Daddy, you're so good at painting? Master's calligraphy is also very good. Gu Jinglian's handwriting was definitely the most beautiful that Uncle Fu had ever seen. It was bold and powerful, like a dragon flying and a phoenix dancing. He had never seen anyone with better calligraphy than Gu Jinglian, including famous calligraphers. Then let Daddy write for me. As Xiaobao spoke, he took the card and ran to Gu Jinglian's room. Gu Jinglian was reading when Xiaobao placed the invitation card in front of him. He said confidently, Daddy, help me write a few words. This little guy always had a way to disturb him. However, Gu Jinglian couldn't do anything about him. He picked up the invitation card and saw a vivid cartoon drawing on it. For a moment he was slightly stunned. You drew this? Yeah. Xiaobao's birthday is next month. This is the invitation card. Birthday? Gu Jinglian remembered that it was indeed his birthday next month. He picked up the fountain pen and asked, what should I write? Well, just write Dear Shanga. I really hope that you can come to my birthday party. Gu Jinglian picked up the pen and wrote it down before handing it to him. Xiaobao took the invitation card from him and glanced at it. He was also impressed by Gu Jinglian's elegant handwriting. Chapter 34:34. Daddy's handwriting is so beautiful. Gu Jinglian's ears really liked this compliment. After finishing the card, Xiaobao felt sleepy. After all, the time at night was limited. By the time he finished the card, it was already 8 o'clock in the evening. After taking a shower and brushing his teeth, he went back to bed to rest. The next morning, Xiaobao went to class and secretly stuffed the invitation card under Shanger's desk. He was a little embarrassed to give it to her face. Shanger went to class and was about to stuff her bag under her desk when she noticed something in it. She took it out and found that it was something like a card. She flipped it open and saw a cartoon drawing of a little girl in a dress and a boy in a suit standing in front of a castle. They were holding hands and looked very cute. She could recognize some of the words and understood that it said, Dear Shanger, I really hope that you can come to my birthday party. Gu Chengza. Shanger took the invitation card and turned around. She saw Xiaobao sitting in his seat with a red face and looking a little restless. She smiled and asked, Xiaobao, did you stuff this in my desk? Yes. Your birthday is coming up soon. Yes. Xiaobao said seriously. My mom, Dad, and I made this together. Mom was in charge of making the invitation card. I was in charge of drawing, and Dad wrote the words. Wow! Shanger exclaimed. You drew this. Isn't it too beautiful? Her voice was a little loud and almost the whole class heard her. When the other children saw this, they immediately crowded around and fought to take the invitation card from Shanger's hands. They all exclaimed one after another. What a beautiful drawing! Xiaobao, did you really draw this? For a moment, the children forgot that Xiaobao was a dangerous person, and could not help but envy Shanger for being able to receive such an invitation card. Shanger said proudly, Xiaobao gave me the invitation card. Xiaobao said that he drew the drawing, his mom made the invitation card, and his dad wrote the words. Oh my God! I thought you bought it. Even the ones you buy aren't as beautiful as this. Look at the handwriting. It's even better than the handwriting in books. Did Xiaobao really do this himself? I can't believe it. For a moment, Xiaobao was extremely pleased with himself. The children took turns to praise him, making him feel like he was floating in the clouds. For the entire day, Xiang'er hugged the invitation card lovingly. This was made by Xiao Bao himself. Moreover, she was the only one in the entire class who received it. The other children were extremely envious. Xiao Bao said that all the children in the class had one. However, Xiang'er was the first to receive it. This meant that Xiao Bao treated her as his best friend. When they got home, Xiao Bao was as happy as a bird. He talked to Chu Ho nonstop. "Mom, did you know? Gina really likes the invitation card I sent her. She said that she would keep it for the rest of her life. The other kids are so envious of Shang. Some of the kids secretly asked me if I made him an invitation card. He said that he wanted to come to my birthday party too." When Chu Ho heard this, she felt gratified. After dinner, Xiao Bao started the huge project again. He made 2 cards in one go. His deskmate was a girl who liked to read comic books, especially Balala Xiao Maxian. Hence he made the girl look like Xiao Maxian. Chapter 34-35. It had to be said that Xiao Bao was a very creative child. Every child's invitation card wasn't monotonous or rigid. For example, Xiang'er once said that she wanted to live in a dreamy castle with a large back garden filled with flowers. So on the invitation card, he drew a castle and flowers, and even carefully put a crown on her head. Xiang'er loved it so much that she couldn't put it down, and the other children in the class were envious. And when the 2 children's cards were brought to class, the 2 children were extremely excited. "Wow! Xiao Bao drew me so handsome." This child especially liked football and he played very well. Xiao Bao drew a jersey for him, and it was very impressive. And the other girl liked to watch Balala Xiao Maxian, so Xiao Bao drew her as a devil fairy. When the girl saw the invitation card, she treasured it to the extreme. From this, it could be seen that Xiao Bao was actually a very meticulous child. He knew how to observe the strengths of each child, or the things that they liked. The sunflower class was in an uproar. This was because Xiao Bao could draw at most 2 cards every night, and then it was time to go to bed. After 3 days, only 5 children in the class received an invitation card. The other children were envious, but they could only look forward to whether or not they would receive Xiao Bao's birthday invitation card. For a moment, they had forgotten that Xiao Bao was the #1 dangerous person in the eyes of all parents. But because they were reserved, they were a little embarrassed to take the initiative to ask Xiao Bao if he would draw their invitation cards. So they could only look forward to it. Some children even came to class early, and then nervously rummaged through their desks. If they saw an invitation card, they would definitely show it off to everyone. Those who didn't receive it would have a face of disappointment, and there were even some who would be depressed and listless for the whole day. To them, this was not just a birthday invitation card. Because of the invitation card, Xiao Bao's relationship with the other children in the class gradually warmed up. Perhaps Xiao Bao didn't realize, but now, he and the other children had recovered their close relationship. As soon as Xiao Bao arrived in class, all the children stared at his every move. Their eyes were filled with yearning and curiosity as they stared at his hand. Their gazes followed him, wanting to see who his new invitation card was for. Those who didn't receive it would naturally sigh. The children who received the invitation card would bring it home and tell their parents about it. Most of the parents were reasonable. Seeing that Xiao Bao's family was so thoughtful, and that they even personally drew a card, they changed their views. Almost all the children who received the invitation cards were allowed by their parents to attend Xiao Bao's birthday party. Chu He, on the other hand, was keenly aware of it. Sometimes, when she went to pick up baby Chu after work, she would see many children excitedly surrounding him and asking him questions. "Xiao Bao, who are you going to draw today? Draw me, draw me. Xiao Bao, I'll definitely go to your birthday party. When the time comes, I'll definitely prepare an awesome gift for you. So, can you give me an invitation card that you drew for me?" On the way back, Chu Ho couldn't help but ask him, "How many invitation cards are left?" Chapter 34-36. Daddy's handwriting is so beautiful. Gu Jinglian's ears really liked this compliment. After finishing the card, Xiao Bao felt sleepy. After all, the time at night was limited. By the time he finished the card, it was already 8 o'clock in the evening. After taking a shower and brushing his teeth, he went back to bed to rest. The next morning, Xiao Bao went to class and secretly stuffed the invitation card under Xiang'er's desk. He was a little embarrassed to give it to her face. Shonger went to class and was about to stuff her bag under her desk when she noticed something in it. She took it out and found that it was something like a card. She flipped it open and saw a cartoon drawing of a little girl in a dress and a boy in a suit standing in front of a castle. They were holding hands and looked very cute. She could recognize some of the words and understood that it said, "Dear Shonger, I really hope that you can come to my birthday party. Gu Chungza." Shonger took the invitation card and turned around. She saw Xiaobao sitting in his seat with a red face and looking a little restless. She smiled and asked, "Xiaobao, did you stuff this in my desk?" Yes. Your birthday is coming up soon." "Yes," Xiaobao said seriously. "My mom, dad, and I made this together. Mom was in charge of making the invitation card, I was in charge of drawing, and dad wrote the words." "Wow!" Shonger exclaimed. "You drew this. Isn't it too beautiful?" Her voice was a little loud and almost the whole class heard her. When the other children saw this, they immediately crowded around and fought to take the invitation card from Shonger's hands. They all exclaimed one after another, "What a beautiful drawing! Xiaobao, did you really draw this?" For a moment, the children forgot that Xiaobao was a dangerous person and could not help but envy Shonger for being able to receive such an invitation card. Shonger said proudly, "Xiaobao gave me the invitation card." Xiaobao said that he drew the drawing, his mom made the invitation card, and his dad wrote the words. "Oh my God! I thought you bought it. Even the ones you buy aren't as beautiful as this. Look at the handwriting. It's even better than the handwriting in books. Did Xiaobao really do this himself? I can't believe it." For a moment, Xiaobao was extremely pleased with himself. The children took turns to praise him, making him feel like he was floating in the clouds. For the entire day, Shonger hugged the invitation card lovingly. This was made by Xiaobao himself. Moreover, she was the only one in the entire class who received it. The other children were extremely envious. Xiaobao said that all the children in the class had one. However, Shonger was the first to receive it. This meant that Xiaobao treated her as his best friend. When they got home, Xiaobao was as happy as a bird. He talked to Chuho nonstop. "Mom, did you know? Gina really likes the invitation card I sent her. She said that she would keep it for the rest of her life. The other kids are so envious of Shang. Some of the kids secretly asked me if I made him an invitation card. He said that he wanted to come to my birthday party too." When Chuho heard this, she felt gratified. After dinner, Xiaobao started the huge project again. He made 2 cards in one go. His deskmate was a girl who liked to read comic books, especially Balala Xiaomaxian. Hence he made the girl look like Xiaomaxian. Chapter 34-37. "Oh," Chuho replied. Then she stood aside and kept quiet. She was too lazy to waste her breath on them. Since the captain had sent her to carry out the mission, she would just do as she was told. Before she knew it, it was already midnight. Singing and dancing, neon lights flashed. The nightlife of the bustling city seemed to have just begun. Neon Paradise was located on the same street as the bar. However, the facade was not big and was hidden in a corner. After midnight, seeing that it was almost time, the police officer in charge immediately waved his hand. A few of his subordinates pretended to be customers and entered the KTV one after another. When they walked into the KTV, they saw a big round table. As the KTV entered the midnight area, in order to attract more people, many girls in bathing suits stood on the dance floor and showed off their supplies. They danced provocatively to attract attention. "Vice Captain, we've found the room 4302. A colleague's low voice came from the earpiece. The vice captain turned around and glanced at the crowd. He said slowly, 4302, one of you go and check how many people are in the room. Chuho was about to walk out, but someone was faster than her. A tall and thin man stood out. Vice Captain, I'm more familiar with the terrain here. I'll go and check the situation first. Okay, go and see how many people are in the room. Okay. That person left quickly. In less than 10 minutes he came back and said, there are about 10 people in the room. At the end of the corridor, the room with the loudest music is there. The doors of KTV rooms were often made of transparent glass. Through the glass he saw 6 or 7 men inside, each holding a woman. They were smoking and swaying their bodies to the loud music. He saw a pile of cash on the table and a lot of cash scattered on the floor. It basically confirmed the fact that they were smoking and gambling. They seemed to be almost done drinking. Some of them have lost consciousness and are standing there dancing. The vice captain stood up and ordered, "Arrest them." A few police officers immediately walked towards 4302. They couldn't wait to finish the mission and go home to sleep. He was too tired. He had worked all day and returned home at night. He had just eaten dinner and had not laid on the bed to rest when he received a call from the captain. Chu-ho remembered that every member of the anti-corruption team had signed a life and death agreement. The so-called life and death contract. The police station would list out a contract on which all kinds of accidents would be written. Therefore, when they joined the anti-mafia group, they all knew that this position was dangerous. Moreover, it was a thankless task. The bars in Beijing were the hardest hit areas. The few of them walked to the door of room 4302 one after another. 2 on the left and 2 on the right. They stood at the door, waiting for the right opportunity. Chu-ho finally lost his patience. If they continued to wait like this, how long would it take? It was just catching a few criminals. Was there a need to waste so much effort? She walked to the door, and before the police officers could react, they watched her raise her foot and kick the door open. The sudden loud noise frightened everyone in the room. This was especially true for the women. They were so frightened by this huge commotion that their faces turned pale. A few police officers were secretly angry at her for acting rashly. They gritted their teeth in hatred. This newbie only knew how to delay and regret. Why did she have to beat the grass and scare the snake? Chapter 34-38. This stupid woman, why did she have to alert the enemy? However, they did not have time to complain. They immediately pulled out their pistols from their waists and rushed in. "Don't move. Put your hands up and squat on the floor. Hurry." Screams could be heard everywhere. In the air there was a strange aroma and a strong smell of alcohol. On the floor, there were many bottles of alcohol and red banknotes spread out on the floor, forming a thick stack. Chu-ho frowned. However, in the private room, a man with 2 women in his arms laughed coldly. "Who are you? Damn it. You've ruined my mood." It was obvious that the atmosphere was at its climax. Chu-hee's sudden intrusion had spoiled their mood. Even an idiot could tell that these people, who were wearing ordinary clothes and holding pistols, were plainclothed policemen. However, they were not afraid. A few burly men slammed their pistols on the table. With cigarettes in their mouths, they sneered. "Are you new police officers? Do you know who our boss is? It's not your place to be so presumptuous. Don't blame us for being rude if you ruin our boss's mood." The police officers looked at each other. Just as they were at a loss as to how to end the situation, Chu-hee suddenly smirked. She picked up a wine bottle with the tip of her foot and held it in her hand. She threw the bottle at the officer, who was about to load his gun, and it hit his wrist. The bottle shattered. The man cried out in shock. His wrist shook and the pistol fell to the floor. The man cursed and immediately bent down to pick it up. Chu-hee, on the other hand, was quick to react. With a kick on the stairs, she leaped into the air and landed a dashing flying kick on his nose. "Ugh!" the man groaned. Due to the huge inertia, he flew a few meters away. Everyone was dumbfounded. Chu-ho's kick was too cool. They did not expect her to be so strong when she was so skinny. One had to know that this man was so tall and sturdy, yet he was sent flying by her kick. While everyone was still in a daze, Chu-ho casually grabbed the gun and loaded it in half a second. She glanced around the room and shouted, "Put your hands on your head and squat on the ground. Don't move." A middle-aged man, who was surrounded by a crowd of people and looked like a boss, slammed the table angrily and stood up. He pointed at her nose and scolded, "Who do you think you are? How dare you behave so atrociously in my territory? Are you trying to show off to me?" Chu-ho didn't have the patience to listen to his nonsense. He flipped over to the table, picked up the wine bottle and smashed it toward his face. Only a clang sound was heard. In the next second, there was the sound of a wine bottle shattering. The bottle exploded on the man's face, and his nose was broken by her. Everyone was even more dumbfounded. F***ck, UF**king B***t. How dare you hit me? The man covered his bleeding nose, pointed at Chu-ho and shouted, "Go!" A group of men rushed toward Chu-he in a hubbub. Clang. Crash. Clang. Clang, clang, clang. 2 minutes later, a few police officers looked at the mess on the floor in shock. In just a moment, the man who was sitting on the sofa was rolling on the floor in pain. Chapter 34-39. There were so many men, but this woman had taken care of them all by herself. The police officers were in disbelief. Chu-ho looked around and saw her colleagues behind her looking as if they had seen a ghost. She frowned. "What are you all standing there for?" It was only after she had spoken that everyone came to their senses. "You! Where are the handcuffs?" Chu-ho said angrily. "Cuff them up." Oh. The police officer was shocked and immediately took out the handcuffs to tie them up one by one. When he called the captain to report to him, he was still waiting anxiously at the police station for news. After all, the target of this operation was an underworld organization with a strong background in the city. They specialized in selling drugs and had a group of prostitutes under them who were involved in sex trafficking. The anti-mafia team had been watching them for a long time and had been waiting for an opportunity to take action. They were worried that some of their colleagues would be injured in this operation. They were especially worried about Chu-ho. She was a woman, and although she had skills, but just as the captain was thinking about this, his cell phone rang. He was shocked. It had not been long since they took action. Could it be? What had happened? He picked up the phone in fear. It was Chu-ho's voice. "Captain, we're about to pack up." "Pack up?" The captain furrowed his brows. "They ran away? They're on the way back to the police station. We've caught them and are about to bring them back for interrogation." The captain opened his mouth wide in shock. He looked as if he had seen a ghost. So fast. That was too fast. He could not believe it. However, when Chu-ho and a few other police officers brought the 15 suspects back to the police station, the captain finally believed it. Originally, the few experienced police officers in the anti-mafia team looked down on Chu-ho. She was just a woman, yet she was in the anti-mafia team. No one was convinced. However, after this experience, they saw with their own eyes that she had subdued the 15 suspects within a few minutes. Especially her outstanding skills. It was simply shocking to the point that people's eyeballs almost popped out. At this moment, the others were completely convinced. You really could not judge a book by its cover. Just by looking at her appearance, it was hard to imagine that Chu-he's weak body contained so much energy. How did she do it? This woman's background was not simple. One of the police officers had not recovered from the thrilling scene just now. He walked up to the captain and asked in surprise, "Captain, this new woman, is she really a woman?" Her skills, her courage, and her calmness in the face of trouble really made these men feel inferior. The captain frowned and asked, "What happened just now?" Just now. Before he could finish speaking, Chu-ho walked to the captain and said, "The mission is over." The captain immediately came back to his senses, nodded and said with a smile, "Thank you for your hard work, Chu." "Or I have a car. Why do you need to take a taxi? I'll send you back. You've worked hard today. I'm worried about you walking alone at night." "Oh, could it be that captain is worried that I'll be attacked by criminals while walking at night?" The captain was speechless. There was really nothing to worry about. Chapter 34-40. The captain said, "Give me a call when you get home." Chu-ho nodded. When she turned around, she broke out in a cold sweat. How could she let the captain of the anti-corruption team send her back to the Gu family? If he looked up and saw that she was staying with the Gu family and recognized the Gu family mansion, he would definitely be in a mess. She was about to leave when the captain called out to her from behind, "Chu-ho." "Yes." She came back to her senses and looked back abruptly. Her elegant face, however, was a man who was more than 1.8 meters tall. His face immediately turned red. He stammered for a long time, but he couldn't think of what he was going to say. Thus he stammered, Be careful on the road." "Okay, don't worry. I'll be fine." Chu-ho left after saying that. A few policemen came up to him. Seeing that the captain was blushing, they couldn't help but tease him. "The captain is blushing. How rare. How rare. Don't tell me you've taken a fancy to her." The captain said angrily. What nonsense are you talking about? Hurry up and interrogate the criminal. Oh. The few of them turned around resentfully and walked towards the interrogation room. The captain seemed to have thought of something and said sternly, Wait. What's the matter? I thought of what I was going to say. The captain said. Since Chu-ho has just joined our anti-corruption team, let's hold a welcome banquet for her tomorrow night. In any case, as her seniors, we have to properly entertain this new policewoman, don't we? The few of them looked at each other but didn't object. After tonight's operation, everyone's impression of Chu-ho had changed. They had originally thought that this woman wouldn't have any skills, and that they would have to take care of her while carrying out the mission. In the end, they didn't expect that she would be the most capable one. Those who had been prejudiced against her were completely dispelled now. Okay, it's settled then. When Chu-ho reached home, it was already 1 o'clock in the morning. Xiao Bao was originally asleep, but no matter how careful she was, she still woke the little guy up. Because Chu-ho was not around, the little guy did not sleep well. In the middle of the night, he heard some noises. When he opened his eyes, he saw Chu-ho enter the room quietly. She didn't seem to realize that Xiao Bao had woken up, so she still tiptoed and changed into her pajamas. Just as she was about to get into bed, she suddenly thought of something. She took out her phone and dialed a number. The call was quickly picked up. Chu-ho, are you home yet? The room was so quiet that the man's voice on the phone was so obvious. Xiao Bao widened his eyes in shock. Why was it a man's voice? Moreover, his tone was so gentle. Could it be another bad guy trying to take advantage of her mother? Chu-ho obviously did not notice Xiao Bao's angry expression behind him. He said into the phone, Captain, I'm home. Oh, that's good. You should rest early. I still have to work tomorrow. Okay, got it. Chu-ho hung up the phone and turned around. Xiao Bao immediately closed his eyes and pretended to be asleep. She quietly got into bed, tucked him in and hugged him to sleep. She fell asleep very quickly, but Xiao Bao suddenly had insomnia. Thinking of that man's unfamiliar phone call, he was suddenly filled with vigilance. Chapter 34-41. The little guy was so immersed in his own world that he didn't notice Uncle Fu entering the room. Uncle Fu looked at him in surprise. Xiao Bao, why are you up so early today? You don't even need me to wake you up. Xiao Bao turned around in shock. Seeing that it was Uncle Fu, he rushed into Uncle Fu's room. Uncle Fu! Bad news! Bad news! Uncle Fu was startled by the little guy's shouting. He hugged him and quickly asked, What's wrong? What's bad news? Sob 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 sob. Xiao Bao said tearfully, Bad news. Mommy seems to have been targeted by a big bad guy. What? Big bad guy? When Fu Bo heard this, he was completely confused. He didn't know what he meant. Xiao Bao said angrily, Mommy went out last night and didn't come home until late at night. Once she got home, she called a man. That man seemed very intimate. The point is, when Mommy used to work, many men chased after her. I'm so angry. Uncle Fu was speechless. Chu-ho went out in the middle of the night? Came home very late? Could it be, was he on some mission? Early in the morning, he heard that a few triad leaders had been arrested. Could it be that he was on a mission last night? Uncle Fu, what should we do? Xiao Bao was still immersed in his own world of despair. He tugged at the corner of his shirt and cried, What if Mommy gets chased away by other men? No, Xiao Bao, don't cry. No, I want to find Daddy. Xiao Bao pushed Uncle Fu away and ran upstairs. Uncle Fu saw this and immediately chased after him in fear. No, Xiao Bao, Master is still sleeping. He chased Xiao Bao all the way upstairs and saw Xiao Bao rushing into Gu Jinglian's bedroom. He pushed the door open and barged in. When Uncle Fu saw this, his heart nearly jumped out of his chest. Could it be that this fellow had not experienced his master's terrible temper when he woke up? The old master had slept very late last night. As a result, he was disturbed by this child early in the morning. He would definitely be angry. Uncle Fu immediately rushed into the room, only to see Xiao Bao walking into the bedroom. He climbed onto Gu Jinglian's bed with his hands and feet, and threw himself onto a certain sickly devil who was sleeping. Dad! Dad, wake up! Something bad has happened. Xiao Bao held Gu Jinglian's face and shouted into his ear. She slapped his face with her little hands to force him to wake up. Gu Jinglian had been sleeping soundly, but Xiao Bao's high-pitched voice